Chapter 601. Shuchan didn't expect that Prince Duan would take a fancy to her and want to take her as his maid. It was obvious that in order to be Prince Duan's maid, she would have to sleep with him. Shuchan couldn't bring herself to do such a thing, no matter how noble Prince Duan was. "I'm sorry. I have to stay here to avenge my father, so I can't leave for now." Shuchan didn't even think about it and straightforwardly rejected the other party. Such a direct reply made Prince Duan's expression change into one of awkwardness. Prince Duan originally thought that as the son of an emperor realm master, it would be easy for him to take a girl as his maid, especially one who was only at the mystical realm. He didn't expect Shuchan to reject him like that. When the other girls heard Shuchan's direct refusal, their faces were filled with envy and jealousy. This girl had such a good opportunity to accompany Prince Duan, but she didn't seize it. Instead, she rejected it. She really didn't know what was good for her. Prince Duan was the son of an emperor realm master. His father was the emperor of the Cloud Empire, the highest existence in the entire Shenwu world. A single word from an emperor realm master could turn the world into a river of blood, wither thousands of bones with a single thought, level the seas with a single slash, and control the fate of billions of lives. Being able to become Prince Duan's maid was equivalent to finding a shortcut to the peak of martial arts. For most people, they wouldn't give up such a shortcut. After all, they might only have this one chance in their lifetime, or they might not even have a chance like this. Shuchan was given such a chance, but she rejected it directly. Not only did Shuchan give up on a path of martial arts, but it also made Prince Duan lose face. Offending Prince Duan would cause a lot of trouble in the future. "Aha! I didn't think that you would be rejected by someone when you wanted to take a maid. Ridiculous, ridiculous." Prince Shen Luo laughed and patted Prince Duan's shoulder. "A dignified prince is being looked down upon like this. I know you're not in a good mood, but if you want to vent, then do it. Do you think I'm like you, venting out everything?" Royal Prince Duan's expression didn't look too good, but he didn't lose his temper in the face of the divine Luo Crown Prince's mockery. Instead, he calmed down and said softly, "Since you have made up your mind, I will not force you. Goodbye." After losing face, Prince Cloud naturally wouldn't stay any longer. He turned around and left with a flick of his sleeves. His subordinates hurriedly followed him. "Miss Ruoxue, I will also take my leave first. I hope that Miss Ruoxue will be punctual for tonight's banquet." The golden-robed Imperial Prince Wuck had a proud smile on his face as he smiled at King Ruoxue before turning to leave. The divine Luo Prince didn't stay for long. He looked at Shuchan playfully before turning around and leaving with his subordinates. After the three martial monarchs' sons left, the crowd heaved a sigh of relief. Duke Ruoxue was the first to sigh and said apologetically, "Everyone, I'm really sorry. I didn't think that the three martial monarch sons would suddenly come and cause such a scene." Those who could stay in this courtyard were all distinguished guests of the Ruoxue region. For example, Long Yu and Shuchan came from the North Snow Imperial City and had some connections with Yuhanshin. These people were naturally unhappy that they were forcefully searched. However, they knew that this matter couldn't be blamed on Duke Ruoxue. They could only blame their own bad luck for running into the three martial monarch sons. "Forget it. We didn't lose anything anyway," many people casually said and then turned to leave. Even if they wanted to take revenge, they didn't know who to look for. Of course, they could only pretend that nothing happened. Look for Duke Ruoxue? They didn't want this to happen either. Look for the three martial monarch sons? They were simply tired of living. Only then would they dare to find trouble with the martial monarch sons after everyone left. Long Yu's desolate afterimage gestured to Shuchan, asking her to leave with him. Shuchan's heart skipped a beat, and she followed Long Yu's desolate ancient afterimage to the back courtyard where there were fewer people. Duke Ruoxue had originally wanted to apologize to the two of them, but there were too many people present. Before Duke Ruoxue could find the two of them had already disappeared. "Shuchan, let's leave this place first. Let's go now." Long Yu's desolate afterimage brought Shuchan to the back garden. His real body appeared and returned Shuchan's spatial warrior bracelet to her as he said in a deep voice. Leave now. In such a hurry? Shu-chan was a little surprised. Just now, when Martial Monarch Cloud left, I saw a flash of killing intent in his eyes. He must be unhappy because you rejected him. He might attack you. It's better if we don't stay and take the risk. Long Yu explained. Killing intent. That's right. Long Yu saw a flash of killing intent in the eyes of the white-robed Martial Monarch Cloud. Although it was only a flash of killing intent, it couldn't escape Long Yu's sharp perception. This made Long Yu realize that Martial Monarch Cloud, who looked the most gentle among the three martial monarchs, was actually the most dangerous one. Shu-chan rejected Martial Monarch Cloud. Although Martial Monarch Cloud didn't dare to casually attack Shu-chan in front of the other two martial monarchs, no one would be able to stop him if he secretly made a move. In addition, Martial Monarch Cloud looked at Shu-chan with a playful expression before he left. This made Long Yu realize that Martial Monarch Cloud was not as gentle as he looked on the surface. All right, I'll listen to you. When Shu-chan heard this, she didn't doubt him. She and Long Yu had gone through life and death situations together. They escaped from the Tianqing dynasty together and took control of the Azura ancient palace together. Shu-chan didn't doubt Long Yu at all. Since Long Yu said that there was danger, then there really was danger. In the next moment, Long Yu raised his hand, and the divine character hidden appeared. He used the technique of divine concealment and brought Shu-chan along with him to hide themselves. After that, they directly soared into the sky and flew towards the south. Using the concealment technique with another person would make both of them invisible. However, the consequence of this was that Long Yu's flying speed was reduced by more than half. However, as long as no one could find them, it was only a matter of time before they left Ruoxue Prefecture. What the two of them didn't know was that as soon as they left Ruoxue Prefecture, a few masked mystical realm martial cultivators broke into Shu-chan's room. However, they discovered that she didn't return to her room at all. These masked martial cultivators even searched the entire courtyard and couldn't find any trace of Shu-chan. Only then did they know that she must have left earlier. When this news reached the ears of Martial Monarch Cloud, who was resting, it made him extremely angry. His eyes were almost on fire. How could Martial Monarch Cloud not be angry after what happened today? He had finally taken a fancy to a young girl and wanted to take her as his maid, but she rejected him. This was simply intolerable for Martial Monarch Cloud. However, in front of Duke Ruoxue and the other two martial monarchs, he didn't want to make a move. However, he didn't expect that Shu-chan would disappear in such a short time. Run? What do you think you can run to? A cold light flashed in Martial Monarch Cloud's eyes. To deal with a small character like Shu-chan, he naturally couldn't be bothered to do it himself. He had subordinates that could be dispatched for this kind of task. The subordinates he brought from the North Snow dynasty this time were a team of 100 people. Among them, there was an Emperor Realm Imperial Guard captain. Of course, this Imperial Guard captain was only responsible for his safety. He wouldn't listen to his orders to hunt down others. This was because this Imperial Guard captain was his father's subordinate, not his. In addition, there were 3 King Realm experts and 10 Seven Daos mystical realm experts. These were all Martial Monarch Cloud subordinates. To track down Shu-chan's whereabouts and hunt down Shu-chan was a piece of cake. Under Martial Monarch Cloud's orders, 1 King Realm expert and 3 Seven Daos mystical realm martial cultivators set off before night had even fallen. They began to inquire about all kinds of information about Shu-chan. These 4 people's ability to hunt and kill was top-notch. Even in the territory of the North Snow dynasty, it was a piece of cake for them to gather information and hunt down the enemies of a martial monarch. At this time, Long Yu and Shu-chan had already left the Ruoxue prefectural palace and took out the Azura spirit boat. The two of them quickly flew south on the Azura spirit boat. With the speed of the Azura spirit boat, it would take a few days to fly across the entire Ruoxue prefecture. Because they were afraid that someone would chase after them, the two of them specially chose a place with few people. Once they encountered other people, they would immediately put away the Azura spirit boat and used the divine concealment technique to move forward quietly. Furthermore, before flying towards the south, the two of them deliberately flew towards the west where there were more people. In Long Yu's words, this was called misdirection. Shu-chan didn't have much experience in this kind of thing. However, she felt that the route Long Yu chose was somewhat reasonable. She felt that this brat Long Yu was really not simple. He actually knew so many escape techniques. 3 days later, the two of them successfully left the territory of Ruoshui Prefecture and stepped into a lush green forest. Once they reached this forest, it could be said that they had already stepped into the territory of the Tianqin dynasty. Long Yu and Shu-chan didn't know which prefectural palace this territory belonged to, but no matter what, it was best not to be discovered by the guards of the Tianqin dynasty. Although the Tianqin emperor was injured, he was still an unparalleled existence to Long Yu and Shu-chan. Once they encountered him, they would definitely die. Therefore, the two of them began to be even more careful when they entered the territory of the Tianqin dynasty. The dense forest was lush, and from time to time, some cheetah demon cultivators would jump out. Long Yu and Shu-chan used the divine concealment technique to quietly avoid them. However, what surprised the two of them was that the cheetah demon cultivators living in this dense forest actually had rather sharp senses. Even though the two of them used the divine concealment technique, they were almost discovered by these demon cultivators. It was extremely dangerous. Every demon cultivator race often has a specific talent. For example, these cheetah demon cultivators have very strong senses. This is their advantage over human martial arts cultivators. However, their cultivation methods are much weaker than human martial arts cultivators, especially at the beginning of the path of martial arts. Even the elixirs they take and the weapons they use are different from those used by human martial arts cultivators. Shu-chan explained to Long Yu, and Long Yu nodded. At this time, he thought of the little fox demon, Chiwa. Although this kid was a handsome young man in human form, Long Yu still saw him as a little fox demon. He wondered what kind of special ability Chihua had. Before the two of them left, many martial arts cultivators in both the Heavenly Mandate Manor and the Shura Mansion expressed that they wanted to leave their manors and mansions to train. Perhaps the next time Long Yu returned to the North Snow Imperial capital, the situation in the Heavenly Mandate Manor and the Shura Mansion would be completely different from before. However, the premise of all this was that Long Yu and Shu-chan could return to the North Snow Imperial capital alive. In the Tianqin dynasty, danger lurked everywhere. In addition, Prince Duan had sent assassins to hunt the two of them down. Their journey together would be extremely difficult. However, this was the purpose of their training. Chapter 602. Long Yu and Shu-chan managed to avoid the cheetah demon cultivators and quickly left the dense forest. However, Long Yu had a feeling that someone was following them in the dark, but he couldn't pinpoint the exact location and identity of the other party, which made him extremely vigilant. Long Yu knew very well that he was in extreme danger at any time, and a little carelessness could cost him his life. There's a lake in front. Let's jump in. Long Yu quickly pointed to a lake in front of them and said to Shu-chan. Shu-chan frowned. Why are we jumping in? I feel that someone is following us. Let's jump in. If he continues to chase us, we won't be able to hide in the water. Long Yu whispered. Shu-chan was stunned for a moment, but then she nodded. She actually didn't notice that someone was following them. Was her perception really that bad compared to Long Yu's? The two of them approached the edge of the lake, and just as they were about to jump in, a black-robed figure suddenly appeared beside them. Princess, wait. The voice made the two of them stop jumping into the lake. They turned their heads and looked at the black-robed figure. Judging from his attire, he should be a disciple of the original Shura Prefecture's demonic shadow track. The reason why the demonic shadow track was called track and not sect was because the people of this sect came and went without a trace. They cultivated an extremely powerful concealment technique. A disciple of the demonic shadow track. Shu-chan stopped what she was doing and asked with a raised eyebrow, "Why are you here?" "This is the princess subordinate, Long Yu, right?" The Six Realms fiend tracking sect disciple did not answer Shu-chan's question directly. Instead, he shifted his gaze to Long Yu and said with a hint of admiration, "I heard that Long Yu defeated Tai Sun, a powerhouse in the Three Realms Divinity Realm, when he was only in the Tribulation Realm, shocking the entire Shura Prefecture. Today, I finally get to see him. Furthermore, he has already entered the Divinity Secret Realm, so he must be even more powerful." In any case, Shu Chan and Long Yu were relieved to meet a disciple of shadow tracing in this place. Since he was a disciple of shadow tracing, he probably wouldn't be a threat to them. Soon, the two of them started talking with this six-path Divine Realm disciple. This person's name was Mo Yuan. He had been cultivating in the demonic shadow track for more than 50 years, and he had deep feelings for the sect. A while ago, when Emperor Tianqin destroyed the demonic shadow track, Mo Yuan relied on his powerful concealment skills to escape from a sect. Then, he began to contact other disciples and prepare a plan for revenge. The sect master of the demonic shadow tracks, the Dark Shadow Monarch, had died near this forest in order to stop Emperor Tianqin. Demon Abyss had personally come to investigate to see if the Dark Shadow Monarch was still alive. However, to his disappointment, he had only found a remnant of the Dark Shadow Monarch's will. In that consciousness, Dark Shadow Monarch had given Mo Yuan many instructions. First, he had to find the princess, Shu Chan, serve her as his master, and help Shu Chan revive Shura Prefecture. Second, he had to return to the Shadow Tracing Sect and retrieve the items in the sect's treasury for Shu Chan. Third, he had to retrieve the Shura Sacred Tree in Shura Valley. Fourth, he had to rescue General Hui Yuanbai, who was trapped in the Nightmare Mountain Range. Originally, Long Yu had been a little cautious and doubtful about Mo Yuan's words. However, after hearing the 4 detailed points, his doubts disappeared. If Mo Yuan had any ill intentions towards Shu Chan and him, there would have been no need for him to say all this. He had even told him the method to retrieve the Shura Sacred Tree. Without Dark Shadow Monarch's guidance, how could a mere 6th Divinity Realm disciple know the method to retrieve the Shura Sacred Tree? One had to know that Dark Shadow Monarch was a demon that didn't care about anyone. If not for the Dragonbone Pagoda, Long Yu would have died in its hands. In that case, let's return to Shura Prefecture first. Shu Chan quickly made her decision. The demonic shadow tracks, Azura Valley, and Nightmare Mountain Range were all on the way from the north to the south. Shu Chan definitely had to get her hands on the Shadow Tracing Sect's treasury. After all, there were many cultivation resources inside. Shu Chan even wanted to get her hands on the Shura Prefecture King's treasury in Shura Valley. However, it wasn't easy to get her hands on any treasury. The Shadow Tracing Sect's treasury was well hidden. Ordinary people wouldn't know about it. The people from the Tianqin dynasty definitely hadn't found it yet. However, Shura Valley's treasury and martial skill pagoda were extremely conspicuous places. They were probably already guarded by the people from the Tianqin dynasty. No matter what, she had to go back and take a look before making a decision. The Shadow Tracing Sect was Shu Chan's first destination. "Princess, I'll be by your side. If there's any danger, I'll warn you in advance. If there's a battle, I'll appear to help." Mo Yuan said respectfully to Shu Chan, "There's no need. Mo Yuan, hurry up and gather with the other Devil Tracing Sect members. Once Long Yu and I are done with these matters, we'll leave the Tianqin dynasty together and head to the North Snow Imperial capital. We'll have a stable foothold there and can develop for a period of time. Once I step into the Imperial Path Mystic Realm, I'll begin to revive the Shura Prefecture." Shu Chan displayed a strong aura and asked Mo Yuan to leave. She didn't want to have someone following behind her all the time. It wasn't a good feeling. Moreover, she wasn't 100% sure that Mo Yuan was sincere in helping her. If this guy had already pledged his allegiance to the Tianqin Emperor, wouldn't it be a bad thing to have him follow her? "Yes, princess." Mo Yuan believed Shu Chan's words without a doubt. He bowed and cupped his fists before disappearing in front of the two of them. Shu Chan and Long Yu each pondered for a while before looking at each other. "Do we still want to jump into the lake?" Shu Chan asked. "Of course not." Long Yu smiled. The two of them continued on their way. They traveled through a desolate forest and needed to pass through 3 counties before they could reach the Shura County. Since they couldn't use the Shura spirit boat to fly, it would take them at least half a month to reach the 3 counties. However, they were here to gain experience, so they weren't in too much of a hurry. Long Yu was just a little nervous about the news of Hui Yuanbai. This loyal old general probably didn't pledge his allegiance to the Tianqin dynasty and was now trapped in the Nightmare Mountains. He didn't know how his situation was. With just him and Shu Chan, it was useless to be anxious. They could only take it one step at a time and go to the Nightmare Mountains to take a look. We'll do the opposite of what Mo Yuan said. We'll first save General Hua, then return to the Shura Valley, and finally go to the Shadow Devil Tracks to find the treasury. Long Yu said to Shu Chan. Shu Chan agreed with his decision, because she was also a little suspicious of Mo Yuan. Fortunately, after leaving the lake, Long Yu didn't feel anyone following them, so he relaxed. The 2 of them ate and slept in the open as they advanced. Furthermore, they did not forget to cultivate. Long Yu's comprehension of the ancient martial technique, 9 underworld heavenly light, had increased significantly. Although he had not succeeded in learning it yet, he was almost there. As for Shu Chan, she had been learning how to condense God chains recently. Her father, Shura King, had taught her this method long ago, so she didn't have to worry about not having a method. However, condensing God chains wasn't easy. Even if she had reached the 5th level of compatibility with the Shadow Attribute Divine Text, it was still very difficult to condense God chains. 10 days later, the 2 of them stepped into the territory of Liang Prefecture. Beyond Liang Prefecture was Shura Prefecture. Long Yu did not have a good impression of Liang County. Back then, when he was in the Devil Nightmare Mountain Range, the 2 7 Divine Power Realm experts of the Liang County appeared to help Deputy General Zhou Li and wanted to make a move against the great General Hui Yuanbai. Fortunately, Shura King had appeared in time. Otherwise, General Hui Yuanbai would have been in danger. Now, the Heavenly Mandate Manor and Shura Mansion in the North Snow Empire were forces that had just been established and were weak. If they could find Hui Yuanbai to guard them, it would be extremely good. Even in the North Snow Empire, a cultivator of the 7 divine realms would be considered an expert. Every bit of power counted. However, when they arrived in the territory of Liang Prefecture, the feeling of being followed emerged in Long Yu's heart again. This time, Long Yu's sense of danger was even stronger. Shu Chan, be careful of sneak attacks at any time. Let's find another lake and jump in. When faced with such a situation, Long Yu always thought of jumping into a lake. This was the best way to find and shake off the pursuers. Shu Chan was stunned when she heard that. She then nodded and said, "Let's go." There were naturally many lakes and rivers in Liang Prefecture. They could find one just by looking around. Soon, the 2 of them headed for a river under a waterfall. It seemed that they were going to jump in. At this moment, a strong gust of wind suddenly appeared behind the 2 of them, whistling towards them. "Kill them," a middle-aged man shouted. Then, a 7-path divine tier cultivator appeared behind the 2 of them. At the same time, 4 to 5 ordinary divine tier cultivators appeared around the 2 of them, unleashing a torrential barrage of attacks at the 2 of them. Divine Concealment Flash. Long Yu was already prepared for a sneak attack. He immediately hugged Shu Chan and activated the Divine Concealment Rune. Instantly, the 2 of them disappeared from everyone's sight. There were a total of 6 people who had ambushed them. One of them was a 7 Daos Divine Realm expert, while the other 5 were 3 Daos Divine Realm and 4 Daos Divine Realm experts. Under normal circumstances, it would be more than enough to deal with a 4 Daos Divine Realm Princess, Shu Chan, and a 1 Daos Divine Realm Long Yu. It was a pity that these people came from the Cloud Empire and had never heard of Long Yu and Shu Chan naturally. They did not make any special preparations. When Long Yu and Shu Chan disappeared from their sight, their expressions changed. Even the middle-aged man in the white robe with the 7 divine realms realized that he could not find any trace of Long Yu and Shu Chan. The pursuers of the Cloud Empire had finally caught up. The middle-aged man in the white robe originally wanted to follow Long Yu and Shu Chan and wait for the others to gather before making a move. He did not expect the 2 of them to find a river and jump into it. He could not wait to make a move. Who knew if he would still be able to find any trace of them after they jumped into the river? Chapter 603. The seven divine realm white-robed man came from the clouds empire called by Jianghua. He looked rather mature and handsome, but there was a layer of darkness between his brows. He did not know the true strength of Long Yu and Shu Quan. He felt that it was more than enough for him to capture Shu Quan and kill Long Yu with 5 divine realm subordinates. Split up and search. Report back to me immediately if you find any clues. Bai Jianghua ordered his 5 subordinates. The 5 divine realm experts did not pay much attention. They were only chasing a 4 divine realm lass and a 1 divine realm brat, so they did not pay much attention to them. Having come from the Clouds Empire to the North Snow Empire, they already had the arrogance of being superior to others. At this moment, how could they have any vigilance? The 5 of them spread out in all directions and searched the forest, trying to find any traces of Long Yu and Shu Quan. This was exactly what Long Yu wanted. If these people did not split up, Long Yu wanted to leave with Shu Quan. After all, these people would not be able to find them. However, since they chose to split up, Long Yu would not be polite. That 4 divine realm guy, let's kill him first. Long Yu whispered to Shu Quan as he brought her to a spot not too far away from one of the 4 divine ability realm martial practitioners that had strayed away from the group. This person looked around sloppily. There was no trace of nervousness in his eyes, as if he was taking a stroll in the wild, not knowing that danger had arrived. Soon, this person was more than 2 miles away from the others. Even if the others heard the commotion and rushed over, they would need at least a few breaths' time. This amount of time was more than enough for Long Yu and Shu Quan to kill this person. I'll confuse him first. Shu Quan, you're in charge of killing him. Long Yu ordered Shu Quan. He then formed a primordial shadow and sent it forward to execute the wild shadow slaughter. That person was the first to react. Seeing Long Yu's desolate primordial shadow flying towards him, he couldn't help but sneer. A mere transcendent realm brat dares to ambush me. Your grandfather? Die. As soon as he finished speaking, he punched out with his fist, and it was accompanied by the rumbling of thunder and surging lightning. In the next moment, Long Yu's primordial afterimage was completely shattered, but at this moment, Shu Chan's petite figure appeared behind him. She raised her hand, and the innate skill, Azura Extreme Ray, condensed into a pitch-black light beam that pierced through the man's chest. Level 5, Synchronization. That person's eyes were wide open, and he had died with a grievance. He hadn't expected that Shu Quan had already reached the 5th level of synchronization with the Shadow Attribute Divine Text. This was also the main reason why his lightning had been unable to block the Azura's absolute light. As the man fell, Long Yu raised his hand, and the power of the solar flame laws scattered, burning the man's corpse to ashes. At the same time, he searched the man's body for all his valuables and stored them in his storage space. One had to admit that the martial cultivators from the Cloud Empire were indeed rich. Just this 4 Daos Divine Realm martial cultivator alone had 2 heaven-grade high-rank combat weapons, several heaven-grade medicinal pills, and dozens of earth-grade medicinal pills. However, most of these medicinal pills were used in battle to replenish Xian Qi, laws, divine runes, and so on. Not many of them were used to increase one's martial realm. This kind of medicinal pill was known as a combat medicinal pill. It was completely different from cultivation medicinal pills. It was consumed during battle, and there were even some medicinal pills that could temporarily increase the strength of a martial cultivator. Of course, there was no such medicinal pill in the possession of Long Yu. After that, Long Yu once again used spirit concealment and disappeared into the forest with Shu Quan. By the time the others arrived from the forest 2 miles away, they were long gone. They didn't even leave their corpses behind. The only thing that remained was the aura of the divine runes, letting others know that a battle had just taken place here. It was a 4 Daos and 3 Daos divine realm martial cultivators. They walked together and noticed the traces of battle. They were killed in an instant. The three Daos Divine Realm martial cultivators' expression changed. If even 4 Daos Divine Realm martial cultivators were killed in an instant, wouldn't he have no chance of surviving if he ran into those two fellows? Oomph, they must have ambushed us. They're just two shameless scum. What's there to be afraid of? The 4 Daos Divine Realm martial cultivators harumphed and looked around, trying to find traces of Long Yu and Shu Chan. But how could they find Long Yu and Shu Chan when they were in spirit concealment? One should know that even Emperor Path's Secret Realms cultivators couldn't find Long Yu when he was in spirit concealment, let alone these Divine Realm martial cultivators. Nether Dragon 9 explosions, 5th explosion, Dragon Heart Decree. Just as the two were on high alert, Long Yu's voice suddenly sounded. Then a black shadow appeared behind the two, followed by a dragon's roar, making the 3 Daos Divine Realm martial cultivators' hearts skip a beat. Die! The 4 Daos Divine Realm martial cultivators turned around and slashed with their swords. The swords were cold and sharp, instantly cutting down several trees behind them. Then, the swords moved like a ray of light, cutting the black shadow that appeared to ambush them in half. Unfortunately, after the black shadow was cut in half, it turned into a cloud of black mist and dissipated. Clearly, it was just an afterimage. This made the 4 Daos Divine Realm martial cultivators' expressions change slightly. Knowing that they had been tricked, they subconsciously used their defensive techniques. Long swords danced, and the sword's light circled around them, forming a layer of sword's light barrier. However, in the next moment, Long Yu's nether dragon blade suddenly appeared, directly shattering the layer of sword's light barrier. Then, a black light beam, Shu Chan's innate mystique, Azura's absolute light, arrived, passing through the gap created by the nether dragon blade and colliding with the martial cultivator's waist. Shu Chan had long comprehended the Azura's absolute light to the 6th heaven, which was the peak of the middle 3 heavens. If she advanced one more step, it would become the strongest upper 3 heavens mystique. With such an attack, the 4 Daos Divine Realm martial cultivators who had the same cultivation as Shu Chan could not withstand it at all, and were killed on the spot. As for the 3 Daos Divine Realm martial cultivators, they were stunned by Long Yu's Dragon Heart Decree for a breath's time. Then, Long Yu stabbed them with a nether dragon blade. Before they could react, their chests were pierced by Long Yu, shattering their heart meridians. The two of them worked together, and against the 3 or 4 Daos Divine Realm martial cultivators, it was a complete instant kill. Of course, Long Yu could only be considered as a support, while Shu Chan's innate mystique was just too strong. This medicinal pill is really useful. It can speed up the recovery rate of divine characters, allowing me to use the same innate mystique in a short period of time, as expected of someone from the Cloud Empire. Shu Chan's eyes lit up, and she continued to encourage Long Yu to search the bodies of the 2 dead martial cultivators for treasures. Soon, he found a few more heaven and earth-grade medicinal pills. As members of the Cloud Empire's guards, there was no shortage of recovery medicinal pills. Now, they were all given a Long Yu, and Shu Chan was able to use the Azura's absolute light a second time in a short period of time because of one of the medicinal pills. It could speed up the recovery rate of divine characters, and it could stimulate a martial cultivator's dantian, allowing them to use the innate mystique they had just used. This kind of medicinal pill could not be found in the original Shura prefecture because it was very difficult to make. Even in places like the Tianqin dynasty and the North Snow dynasty, it was rare. Even if 1 or 2 appeared, the price would be exorbitant, and ordinary martial cultivators would not be able to afford it. However, to the martial cultivators of the Cloud Empire, especially the guards of Prince Cloud Empire, this kind of medicinal pill was just a common prescription. As usual, Long Yu and Shu Chan destroyed the corpses, looted their belongings, and went into concealment. If not for the medicinal pills, Long Yu would not be able to use concealment so freely. This was because there was still a limit to the usage of the concealment divine characters, and he could not maintain this state for a long period of time. But with these recovery medicinal pills, there was no need to worry about this problem. From the 3 martial cultivators of the Cloud Empire, Long Yu obtained a total of 12 of these medicinal pills. He used one to maintain his concealment, and Shu-chan tried one. Once again, she used the innate mystique, Azura's absolute light, and killed the second opponent with 4 divine abilities. 3 people were dead, and there were only 2 left. However, the remaining 2 seemed to be a little more astute and cautious. One of them was a 3 Divine Realm expert, while the other was a 4 Divine Realm expert. They carefully came to the place to investigate, and after exchanging glances, they turned around and left, heading in the direction of the leader by Jianghua. Chase! Killing intent flashed in Long Yu's eyes. Bai Jianghua was still several miles away. If he chased after them now, he would definitely be able to kill the 2 before Bai Jianghua arrived. Shu-chan agreed with Long Yu's plan. She flew forward and used the innate mystique, Eyes of Azura. As a pair of eerie black eyes appeared in the air, they directly sucked the 2 martial cultivators away. This was the innate mystique that Shu-chan comprehended when she was in the 2 divine abilities realm, Eyes of Azura. The terrifying and strange Eyes of Azura was a completely spiritual attack. Once used, it could shock the opponent's soul and suck the opponent's consciousness into the eyes. Kill! Shu-chan threw out a pitch-black plate that emitted an ancient aura. This was her great desolate realm mid-tier combat weapon, the primordial Azura Compass. As soon as the primordial Azura Compass appeared, the power of Azura divine runes burst out, forming countless rays of black light that trapped the 2 martial cultivators and continuously sucked away their energy. In just 3 breaths' time, the 3 and 4 divine abilities realm martial cultivators who had their consciousness sucked away by the Eyes of Azura had their Shin Chi sucked dry by the primordial Azura Compass. Following that, the power of the Azura divine runes invaded their bodies, destroying all their meridians. It was Long Yu's first time seeing Shu-chan using this great desolate realm combat weapon. She must be trying to kill her opponents as fast as possible, so that she could fight against the remaining 7 divine abilities. Who said that when facing 7 divine abilities, Long Yu and Shu-chan would run away. After Shu-chan achieved level 5 synchronization with the Shadow Elemental Divine Runes, she had once fought against Emo Jian, who was also a 7 divine abilities realm martial artist. The battle ended in a draw, which showed that Shu-chan's true strength was no weaker than an ordinary 7 divine abilities realm martial artist. Chapter 604. Since they dared to chase after him, they had to be prepared to be killed instead. However, it was clear that Bai Jianghua hadn't expected that the 7 divine ability realm martial cultivator from the Cloud's Empire would pose a threat to him with just 2 low-level divine ability realm martial cultivators. Bai Jianghua quickly arrived at the scene of the battle based on the commotion just now. However, he only sensed a trace of divine symbol energy and did not see anyone. He was sure that his 2 subordinates were heading towards him just now, but they were nowhere to be seen. What had happened? Could it be that they were killed by those 2 brats? No, impossible. Those 2 brats are only at the 1 and 4 divine realms. How could they have killed my subordinates? Bai Jianghua frowned. He could not figure it out. He walked forward in the dense forest while maintaining his vigilance at all times. Perhaps those 2 brats had an accomplice, which was why they were able to kill his subordinates one by one. But even if they have an accomplice, it can't be someone from the Emperor Path Secret Realm. Otherwise, why would they hide their heads and show their tails? Bai Jianghua was completely fearless. He was a martial cultivator from the Cloud's Empire. He had countless treasures and pills with him. How could he not be a match for a martial cultivator from a small place like this? When he reached the middle of 2 huge trees, something unexpected happened. Long Yu and Shu-chan had been using their divine concealment technique, observing him from the side. Even though Bai Jianghua was fully focused on defending against sneak attacks, they still chose to make their move, because Shu-chan was very confident that she would be able to win. Primordial Azura Compass. Shu-chan raised her hand, and the great desolate realm mid-tier combat weapon, the Primordial Azura Compass, shot out like a tornado. Countless rays of black light shot towards the 7 white-robed martial cultivators, trying to trap them and absorb their energy. However, the white-robed martial cultivator, by Jianghua, was already prepared for this. Sensing that someone was sneaking up on him, he immediately unleashed the divine symbol energy. A pin-shaped combat weapon appeared in his hand, emitting a blinding light that blocked the rays of light from the primordial azure compass. This pin-shaped combat weapon was also a Great Desolate Realm mid-tier combat weapon, and it was extremely compatible with a white-robed martial cultivator, no weaker than Shu Chan and the primordial azure compass. After all, Shu Chan was still very young. Even counting from the time she was born, she had the primordial azure compass longer than the white-robed martial cultivator. The power of the white radiant divine runes sprinkled out from the brush had a slight restraining effect on Shu Chan's azure divine runes. However, Shu Chan didn't retreat. Even if she had to use the desolate azure compass to restrain the power of her opponent's great desolate grade battle weapon, it was still a good thing. Good fella, you dare to sneak up on me, your grandpa Bai? You must be dreaming. Bai Jianghua coldly harumphed, but he did not plan to kill Shu Chan right away, because he felt that since Shu Chan and the other 4 martial cultivators dared to sneak up on him, they must have an accomplice in the dark, and it wasn't just a single martial cultivator. A martial cultivator at the primordial azure realm could pose any threat to him. A martial cultivator at the primordial azure realm? Bai Jianghua did not put Long Yu in his eyes at all. All of his thoughts were on the unknown martial cultivator that was hiding in the dark. He needed to be on the lookout for an expert to sneak up on him, and that would be the time for him to unleash his skills. Against Shu Chan, he did not plan to use any skills. Innate skill, Eye of Azura. The Azura divine symbol energy in Shu Chan's body erupted, forming a pair of pitch-black eyes in the forest. The pupils were as frightening as Azura's, and a chilling aura enshrouded the entire forest. Bai Jianghua felt his hair stand on end as the 2 eyes stared at him. Just as he was about to use a martial skill to knock the Eye of Azura away, he realized that he couldn't move at all. Azura Absolute Ray. The control of the Eye of Azura was top-notch. Without any preparation, even Bai Jianghua, who was a 7 martial cultivator, couldn't move at all. Shu Chan then used her innate skill, Azura Absolute Ray. A pitch-black Azura light beam shot out and landed heavily on Bai Jianghua's chest. Fortunately, Bai Jianghua's cultivation was profound, and he broke through the control of the Eye of Azura as quickly as possible. Moreover, he used the Radiance Divine symbol energy in his body to defend himself. A layer of radiance barrier appeared before his chest, and it barely blocked the Azura Absolute Ray. However, the power of the Azura Divine symbol wasn't limited to just that. Even though the Azura Absolute Ray was blocked, it still created a powerful impact that blasted Bai Jianghua several meters away. Right at this moment, Long Yu made his move. 4 primordial figures attacked from all directions, and each of them executed 2 explosions of the Nether Dragon's 9 explosions. In other words, Bai Jianghua suffered the first 8 explosions of Long Yu's Nether Dragon's 9 explosions at the same time. Dragon roars resounded incessantly and shook Bai Jianghua's heart. Even though he was an expert at the 7 divine abilities realm, he was still affected by the dragon roars at this moment, and the 9th hell energy invaded his body. Break! Bai Jianghua roared. Radiance divine symbol energy instantly erupted, and the netherworld aura that invaded his body was dispersed. After all, he was a 7 martial cultivator. Even though he was holding back, he wasn't someone that Long Yu could easily deal with. The Nether Dragon's 9 explosions and 8 consecutive explosions actually didn't cause any damage to Bai Jianghua at all. He only had to spend some effort to deal with it. Blood Sacrificial Shadow Kill Explode. However, Long Yu's final move was completely executed at this moment. The 4 primordial figures took advantage of the time when Bai Jianghua was dispersing the netherworld aura in his body to approach Bai Jianghua at the fastest speed possible. Then each of them executed a perfect stage primordial shadow kill technique, blood sacrificial shadow kill. The primordial figures originally didn't have any blood in their bodies. However, when Long Yu formed the figures this time, he first added some of his own blood. Therefore, when he spat out 4 mouthfuls of blood, 4 small black and red figures were instantly formed, and they instantly shattered by Jianghua's radiance barrier. The radiant divine rune barrier that Bai Jianghua had hastily condensed had first withstood Shu Chan's Azura absolute light, and then had been bombarded by Long Yu's 4 little black and red figures. Yet, it had directly shattered to pieces. One could imagine just how tyrannical this move of Long Yu's was. And this wasn't Long Yu's strongest level. The Nether Dragon Blade was still tightly grasped in Long Yu's hand. However, unless it was absolutely necessary, Long Yu's main body definitely wouldn't get close to Bai Jianghua. Otherwise, Bai Jianghua could kill him with a casual wave of his hand. After all, Bai Jianghua's martial realm far exceeded his. What a surprise! A trace of blood flowed out from the corner of Bai Jianghua's mouth. His eyes flickered with anger. He truly didn't expect that he would be forced into such a sorry state by these 2 brats. In that case, these 2 brats could really kill his useless subordinates. Surprised? The corner of Shu Chan's lips curled up. She raised her hand, and 1,000 attribute stones flew out, forming a formation that surrounded Bai Jianghua. Bai Jianghua didn't have the slightest doubt. He immediately condensed the radiance energy in his hand, preparing to shatter these strange attribute stones. However, in the next moment, a strange illusory energy spread out from these attribute stones, enveloping Bai Jianghua within. Just like that, Bai Jianghua's entire person became dizzy, as if he had fallen into an illusory formation. Take this chance to kill him. Shu Chan called out to Long Yu and took the lead to activate the ancient Azure Compass. Countless rays of black light shot out, bombarding Bai Jianghua's body that was surrounded by the attribute stones. Long Yu's heart moved. He raised his hand and released the Siphon Divine runes. The 5-colored Siphon Divine runes rushed out and covered Bai Jianghua's body. Even now, Long Yu didn't dare to approach Bai Jianghua. However, the power of the Siphon Divine runes could also help Shu Chan. It took time to arrange the attribute stones. Long Yu's previous 4 desolate ancient shadows were to buy time for Shu Chan. In reality, when the Dreamland Stone took effect, Long Yu had already completed his mission. However, he couldn't watch Shu Chan fight alone. At this critical moment, he still condensed the Siphon Divine runes to help. Against the ancient Azure Compass's attack, Bai Jianghua didn't react at all. His eyes were blank, as if he had fallen into a dream. In the next moment, the ancient Azure Compass's rays of black light pierced into Bai Jianghua's body like countless swords, turning him into a sieve. Done. Feeling Bai Jianghua's aura rapidly weakening, his heart breaking, and his life ending, Shu Chan breathed a sigh of relief. No wonder it's Annie's help. Impressive. Long Yu was impressed. The attribute stones that Shu Chan took out were called Dreamland Stones. Now, Shu Chan's mother, Shu Ruoxian, was inside these stones. She was already in existence in the Imperial Path arcane realm. However, Shu Ruoxian was unable to leave these Dreamland Stones because her physical body no longer existed. Only her consciousness remained in the Dreamland Stones. Releasing the Dreamland Stones was Long Yu and Shu Chan's plan. As long as they had enough time to place the Dreamland Stones, everything would be easy to handle. If an Emperor Path Secret Realm expert were to make a move, it would be a piece of cake to make Bai Jianghua fall into a dream, without any defense. So what if Bai Jianghua was a 7-path arcane realm warrior? Still defenseless, he was killed by Shu Chan. In this battle, I've absorbed the soul seals of 6 people, including Bai Jianghua's soul seal. The power of the Nether Void Dragon Blade has increased by 3 times. Long Yu strolled to the side of Bai Jianghua's corpse and found a waste token on his body. The words Cloud Clouds by Jianghua were written on it, letting Long Yu know that this person came from the Cloud Clouds Empire, and his name was Bai Jianghua. Not bad. including this pen. Shuchan also walked up and grabbed the pen-shaped Great Desolate Realm combat weapon that was trying to escape. This thing had developed its own consciousness. Just now, it had also been enchanted by the Dreamland Stone. Now that it had recovered, it was trying to escape. Long Yu used the Nether Void Dragon Blade to erase the Soul Seal. This was something that Long Yu was very familiar with. Although it was a Great Desolate Realm combat weapon, erasing the Soul Seal of a dead person was a piece of cake. Chapter 605. After killing Bai Jianghua, the expert from the Cloud's Empire, Long Yu and Shuchan had not only obtained the mid-grade Great Desolate Realm pen-shaped combat weapon, but also more Heaven Realm healing pills, and even 2 Great Desolate Realm healing pills. Judging from the aura emitted by the 2 pills, as long as one didn't die, they would be able to quickly recover from all injuries. The effect was even better than Long Yu's self-healing Divine Rune, which he had comprehended 20% of. Unfortunately, there was a limit to how many healing pills one could consume. That was because the same healing pill was not only expensive, it didn't have the same obvious effect as the first one. The 2 healing pills were given to Long Yu and Shuchan, while the mid-grade Great Desolate Realm pen-shaped combat weapon was put into the Void Spirit Dragon Blade storage space by Long Yu. Other than that, there were also 2 high-grade Heaven Realm combat weapons, a pair of boots, and a long whip. Long Yu had erased the soul imprint on the pair of boots and put them on. The Heaven Realm combat boots could double one's speed by activating its power. However, it would consume a large amount of Xian Qi. Unless it was compatible with the pair of boots, then it would be much more useful. For the time being, Long Yu could only use the pair of boots to save his life. If he used the boots together with his movement martial skill, the sudden burst of speed would be extremely terrifying. The 2 continued to move forward. Not long after, they left the dense forest and entered the territory of Liang County. When they reached the center of Liang County, it was a complete desert. It was impossible for ordinary martial cultivators to survive and cultivate here. However, it was not a problem for martial cultivators in Liang County who had comprehended fire attribute Divine Runes. It was even helpful for them to comprehend Divine Runes and Divine abilities. Fighting in a desert like this, martial cultivators in Liang County would have an advantage. Therefore, there were very few martial cultivators in this place. Under such circumstances, Long Yu and Shuchan had to be even more careful. Anyone who came here would be interrogated again and again. If they were caught by the people of Liang County, their whereabouts would be exposed. When they encountered other people, Long Yu would directly use the divine concealment technique, quietly evading with Shuchan. Like this, there were no major problems along the way. It was just that constantly using the divine concealment technique made Long Yu quite tired, and he had to take several medicinal pills to recover the power of the divine characters. Luckily, the people from the Cloud Empire came to deliver the pills. Otherwise, it would take a lot of time to pass through Liang County. Shuchan smiled and said, "Yes, but the people of the Cloud Empire probably won't let this matter go. Soon, other pursuers will catch up. We must be careful." Long Yu nodded. Shuchan nodded in agreement. "We will reach Shura County in another 100 miles. I wonder what the situation is like in Shura County. If we take a detour and directly enter from the north, we might encounter some trouble." Long Yu pondered for a moment and said, "Yes, if Emperor Tianqin guessed that we would return and set up a checkpoint in the north of Shura County, it won't be easy to sneak in. It's better to take a detour to the west. It will also be closer to the Nightmare Mountains." Shuchan said, "If we can rescue General Huayuan Bai, our battle strength will be stronger, and we will have more assurance in doing things. I just don't know where he is now, and how is his situation?" Long Yu said as he shook his head. "No matter what, let's go to the Nightmare Mountains first." Shuchan was quite familiar with Shura County and its surrounding terrain. With the support of Long Yu's divine concealment technique, Shuchan quickly found a detour and entered the original Shura County from the west. This direction was not far from the Devil Nightmare mountain range. However, What surprised the two of them was that the Azura County was now filled with dense ghost chi, making it difficult for them to breathe. This is the aura of the ghost evil county. Long Yu's expression changed, and even Shu Chan's expression darkened. The ghost chi of the ghost evil county was floating in the Shura County. Could it be that the ghost evil county was now under the control of the ghost evil county king? Could it be that all of Emperor Tianqin's actions are being pushed by the ghost evil county king? Shu Chan's eyes flashed with hatred. Along the way, she hadn't seen any news about her father. It was as if the Shura king had died after the battle with Emperor Tianqin, and there was no news of him at all. Shu Chan didn't dare to think too much. She could only prepare herself for her father's death, so she naturally hated the instigator of all this. Originally, Shu Chan thought that it was Emperor Tianqin who wanted to move against the Shura County, but now it seemed that after the Shura County was taken over by Emperor Tianqin, it was given to the ghost evil county king to manage. Even the entire Shura County was filled with dense ghost chi. It was not hard to imagine that all of this was being pushed by the ghost evil county king. The ghost evil county king had suffered at the hands of the Shura king, so it was very likely that he was thinking of a way to take revenge. He just needed to convince Emperor Tianqin to take action. For the ghost evil county king, this shouldn't be a difficult matter. As long as a large portion of the Nightmare Mountain's mineral production was given to Emperor Tianqin, the Emperor Tianqin would most likely agree. To Emperor Tianqin, it didn't matter who the county was. The key was to obtain the greatest benefits and obtain the majority of the cultivation resources. Only in this way could Emperor Tianqin control all the prefectures in the Tianqin dynasty and have them firmly under his control. Things are still uncertain. Let's continue forward. Long Yu comforted Shu Chan in a soft voice. Then, he pulled her along and continued forward. Soon, they reached the depths of Azura County. They were a little closer to the Devil Nightmare Mountain range. At this point, the surrounding ghost chi did not weaken. Instead, because they were closer to the ghost evil county, it became denser. The two of them passed by a small city and a few martial cultivator villages. With Long Yu's divine concealment technique, he obtained a lot of news. The most important news was that the Shura County had been renamed to the Nightmare Mining Area. Most importantly, this area was really given to the Ghost Evil County's ruler, the Ghost Evil King. This discovery made Shu Chan completely silent. After all, as a princess, she naturally did not feel good when she saw the prefecture palace, as she was so familiar with being occupied by the Ghost Evil King, that sinister fellow. With our talent, sooner or later, we'll be able to take back all of this. Long Yu's eyes flickered as he said to Shu Chan, "The most important thing now is to find General Hua's location. When the time is right, we will leave this place and quickly accumulate our strength in the North Snow Empire." Shu Chan obviously knew this, but seeing the familiar Shura County filled with the aura of the Ghost Evil County, she still felt a bit sad. Along the way, many martial cultivators in the cities and villages expressed their resentment towards the Ghost Evil County's invasion. However, they couldn't do anything about it. After all, they were weak, so even if they had resentment, they couldn't vent it out. Therefore, the number of martial cultivators in the cities and villages decreased a lot. Most of them went to the neighboring counties. Even if they lived and cultivated in a place like the Liang County, it was still better than cultivating in a place like the Ghost Evil County. As a result, the number of martial cultivators in the Azura County was rapidly decreasing. Countless martial cultivators chose to leave the county and not return. Long Yu and Shu Chan continued to run, but they still couldn't see a single person. The Nightmare Mountain quickly appeared in front of the two. Here, the Yin Chi in the Ghost Evil County was even denser, making it hard for people to breathe. Fortunately, Long Yu's 9 nether divine characters could completely suppress this Yin Chi. He could casually condense some Yin Chi to disperse it. On the way here, they heard that the Nightmare Mountain was now filled with people from the Ghost Evil County and the Tianqin dynasty. The martial cultivators of the Nightmare Legion in Ashura County had either surrendered to the Tianqin dynasty, died, or followed Hui Yuan by to hide in the Nightmare Mountain. Therefore, as soon as he stepped into the Nightmare Mountain range, Long Yu immediately used the divine concealment technique to hide both himself and Shu Chan before quietly entering. In the Nightmare Mountain that was filled with endless Shi, there were indeed many martial cultivators from the Tianqing dynasty and the Ghost Evil County patrolling. After all, this was the biggest reason why the Tianqing dynasty attacked the Shura County. The Nightmare mining area was naturally guarded to prevent outsiders from entering. Fortunately, after using the divine concealment method, Long Yu and Shu Chan's figures were completely hidden. Even the experts in the King Road secret realm might not be able to find them. Quietly, Long Yu heard a lot of news from the patrolling martial cultivators from the Tianqing dynasty and the Ghost Evil County. General Hua is trapped in the Death Valley. When Shu Chan heard this news, her expression changed slightly. The Death Valley? What kind of place is that? Hearing this, Long Yu frowned slightly. Just from a name, he knew that the Death Valley was not a good place. However, only by hiding in an extremely dangerous place could one survive until now. Otherwise, any expert in the King Road secret realm would be able to capture Hui Yuanbai and his group of defeated soldiers in one fell swoop. The Death Valley is one of the two great danger zones in the Nightmare Mountain. The other place is called the Azura Abyss. Shu Chan solemnly explained, the origin of the Shura County is from the Azura Abyss. It is said that the first Azura Prefecture king went to the Azura Abyss and obtained the Azura Divine Rune. From there, he comprehended the Azura Divine Rune. Later on, he stepped into the King Road secret realm and was given the title of Azura Prefecture by the Tianqing Emperor. The Azura Abyss. So that's how it was. The Azura Divine Rune was obtained from there. Long Yu was slightly enlightened and nodded to express his understanding. After the Azura Divine Rune was taken away by the ancestors, it became a danger zone. In recent years, it has become even more dangerous. Chapter 606. After listening to Shu Chan's words, Long Yu finally understood the origin of Azura Prefecture. However, even after saying so much, she still didn't tell him about Death Valley. Fortunately, Shu Chan didn't forget to introduce Death Valley. She continued, similar to Azura Abyss, Death Valley is filled with the power of divine runes of death. If ordinary martial cultivators step into it, they will be constantly eroded by the power of divine runes of death and eventually die. Since ancient times, it is said that very few people who entered Death Valley could come out. Those who did all became Emperor Realm or even Emperor Realm experts. Divine runes of death. Hearing this, Long Yu's expression turned cold. This thing seemed to be very powerful. If it was like the Azura Abyss, where the divine runes of death were hidden, then this trip to Death Valley might have some unexpected harvests. Unfortunately, Shu Chan didn't know much about Death Valley. The two could only go there first and see the situation before making a decision. Under the state of divine concealment, the two quickly went from the edge of Nightmare Mountain Range to the center of the mountain range. The gloomy and ghostly aura belonging to the martial cultivators of Ghost Evil Prefecture became thicker and thicker, but it was all blocked by the power of Long Yu's divine runes of Nine Nether. Fortunately, Shu Chan was quite familiar with this mountain range. Soon, the two were not far from Death Valley. However, the two faced a problem. Outside of Death Valley, there were many martial cultivators of Tianqing dynasty and Ghost Evil Prefecture. They seemed to have united to prevent Hui Yuanbai, who had entered Death Valley, from leaving. Long Yu and Shu Chan looked at each other and nodded. Although Death Valley was extremely dangerous, the two had many tricks up their sleeves. They could still try to enter. After all, entering Death Valley wasn't a guaranteed death. Throughout history, there were many people who came out and eventually reached the pinnacle of Emperor Realm. Outside of Death Valley, there was a dense forest everywhere. Many martial artists from the Tianqing dynasty patrolled the area, and there were also martial artists from the Ghost Evil County hiding in the dark. They were like death gods in the shadows, watching and not letting anyone get close to Death Valley. They also did not let the martial artists in Death Valley leave even half a step. Among the martial cultivators of the Tianqin dynasty, the strongest was only at the 7 Daos divinity realm. It seemed like the Tianqin emperor didn't care much about Hui Yuanbai. Otherwise, he would have directly sent an Emperor Path secret realm expert, and Hui Yuanbai might not have had the chance to run into Death Valley. I wonder how Hui Yuanbai is doing in Death Valley. Long Yu and Shu Chan used the divine concealment technique and stealthily bypassed the many Tianqin dynasty martial artists before stepping into Death Valley. This was an extremely narrow entrance to a valley, or rather, the entrance to a cave. One could only step in from here, and it was impossible to fly in from the sky. After entering the cave, a wave of death aura hit them in the face, causing Long Yu and Shu Chan to shiver. This was the power of the divine runes of death. In Death Valley, the eerie ghost energy of the ghost evil county could not enter at all. Once it spread here, it would be dispersed by the power of the divine runes of death, unable to condense. Death Valley and Azura Abyss were located in the original Ghost Evil County and Azura County, respectively. They were not close to each other, but they were one of the two great danger zones in the Devil Nightmare Mountain Range. First, they passed through a long and narrow cave that was dozens of miles away. In this distance, the two could feel the power of the divine runes of death becoming denser and denser, constantly corroding their bodies. If they did not deal with the power of the divine runes of death that invaded their bodies, once they corroded their organs, there would be no hope of saving them. But soon, Long Yu and Shu Chan found a solution. Shu Chan relied on her tyrannical martial arts realm and the Azura divine runes to resist the divine runes of death. According to the rate at which the divine runes within her were being consumed, she could resist for at least 4 hours. Now, she had many heaven-grade recovery pills on her, enough to increase this time to 24 hours. In other words, 1 day and 1 night. As for Long Yu, it was even simpler. The 9 nether divine runes had a natural restraining effect on the power of the divine runes of death. Long Yu had already formed the 9 nether tyrant body, so the power of the divine runes of death was unable to invade his body. As for the surface of his body, he only needed to cover it with a small amount of 9 nether divine runes to block the invasion of the divine runes of death. In comparison, Long Yu did not need to take any pills to last longer than Shu Chan in Death Valley. After passing through the dozens of mile-long and narrow cave, the two finally entered an open valley. The divine runes of death spread throughout the valley like a gray fog. What surprised Long Yu was that there were some plants growing on the ground, and they looked like medicinal herbs. It's actually the flower of death. Shu Chan was shocked by these things. Flower of death? What is that? Long Yu asked. The flower of death is an extremely rare medicinal herb. However, it doesn't have any effect on its own, and it is also extremely poisonous. Only the fruit of death that appears after the flower of death wilts is the best material to refine the antidote. Shu Chan explained, unfortunately, this patch of flower of death doesn't seem to have any signs of bearing fruit. As the Azura Countess, her knowledge was naturally not something Long Yu could compare with. Now that she had recognized the poisonous flower of death, the two of them naturally had to take a detour. The two of them could not feel the aura of any other martial cultivator. The aura of the divine runes of death was too strong, and it covered up all vitality. In the entire Death Valley, besides the colorful flower of death, there were no other plants. The aura of the divine runes of death spread, and the entire world seemed to be dead. Long Yu kept feeling the power of the divine runes of death in the valley, and he quickly discovered that the power of the divine runes of death seemed to have a source. It was constantly drifting and gathering from a direction. He told this discovery to Shu Chan, and Shu Chan said, "Then let's go and take a look." The two of them could still endure for a long time, so they were not afraid of the divine runes of death. They were just afraid that they would run into some unexpected danger. Moving towards the source of the divine runes of death, the two of them quickly saw only the gray power of the divine runes of death. Even the flower of death couldn't grow here. When they reached this place, the pressure on the two of them suddenly increased. Originally, Shu-chan could resist the divine runes of death for 2 hours. Now, she was afraid that she could only resist for the time of a cup of tea. Moreover, the closer they got to the front, the thicker the divine runes of death became. Suddenly, the two of them heard the roar of a wild beast. It came from the gray fog of death in front of them, and it was accompanied by the voices of many people. It seemed like a group of martial cultivators were being chased by a wild beast. It should be General Hua's people. Let's go take a look. Long Yu and Shu-chan glanced at each other, then nodded their heads. With extreme speed, they rushed forward. Very quickly, in the distance, they saw a gigantic silhouette that was 10 feet tall. It looked like an ape and was currently roaring as it chased after the nearby martial cultivators. The martial cultivators that were running away were the original members of Azura Province's Nightmare Legion. There were more than 100 of them, but they were being chased by the black ape without any ability to resist. General Hua is there. Shu-chan's martial realm was higher, so her vision was clearer. She immediately saw Hui Yuanbai near the black ape. Long Yu followed her gaze and finally saw Hui Yuanbai, dressed in white, standing not far from the black ape's feet. He was using all kinds of methods to resist the ape's attack. Seeing Hui Yuanbai's sweaty face, it was obvious that he would not be able to hold on for much longer. Let's help. Although Long Yu and Shu-chan did not know what was going on in the dojo, they had no choice but to help. They dashed out and attacked the black ape at an extremely fast speed. The black ape seemed to be made of divine runes of death. In terms of strength, it might not be as strong as Hui Yuanbai, a 7 Daos divine realm expert. However, the area covered by the divine runes of death was the creature's natural cradle. If it fought here, its strength might be comparable to an Emperor Path secret realm expert. I have Azura. As soon as Shu-chan entered the dojo, she immediately used this innate divine ability. A pitch-black eye appeared above her head and looked at the black ape in the dojo. It's the princess. The princess is here. As soon as she made her move, the martial cultivators of the Nightmare Legion immediately shouted. Their voices were filled with surprise. Obviously, they did not expect that the princess would come to help in such a desperate situation. Although the princess's strength might not be comparable to General Hui Yuanbai's, Hui Yuanbai was already evenly matched with the black ape. With the addition of the princess, perhaps, this is the spirit of the divine runes, a spiritual creature formed by the divine runes. It's not wise to fight it in its territory. Let's lure it out of this area so that we can better deal with it. Shu-chan said to Hui Yuanbai as she made her move. Hui Yuanbai was in an extremely sorry state. He rolled backwards to avoid the black ape's attack and nodded. I know it's the spirit of the divine runes, but it won't leave this area. It's too difficult to lure it out. General Hua, what exactly happened here? Shu-chan continued to ask. With the appearance of the Eye of Azura, the black ape seemed to focus all its attention on the Eye of Azura. It roared angrily and attacked the Eye of Azura, giving Hui Yuanbai some time to catch his breath. The Tianqin dynasty has occupied Azura Prefecture, and our Nightmare Legion has been forced to surrender to the Tianqin dynasty. However, this old man was unwilling to surrender, so I escaped into Death Valley with my brothers. Hui Yuanbai laughed bitterly. We've been in Death Valley for a few days. Of the thousands of brothers I brought in, only less than 100 are left. The rest have all been corroded by the divine runes of death. Sitting and waiting for death is not our style, so we wanted to venture deeper to see what's inside. It was also at this time that we encountered the spiritual creature formed by the divine runes of death. The death ape was completely formed by the power of the divine runes of death. It did not have a martial realm, but in Death Valley where the divine runes of death spread, it could display strength that surpassed the Emperor Path secret realm. This was also the reason why Hui Yuanbai and the others could not fight back despite being chased. In the next moment, Long Yu also joined the battle. Chapter 607. Long Yu had come all the way from the narrow cave at the entrance of Death Valley. He had long discovered that the power of the netherworld divine characters could restrain the divine characters of death to a certain extent. However, he had never thought that the power of the netherworld divine characters of death would have such a strong killing effect on the pitch-black ape in front of him. Because the pitch-black ape was neither a martial cultivator nor a demon cultivator. It had no martial arts realm. Therefore, its power completely depended on the power of the divine characters of death. When the divine characters of death encountered the netherworld divine characters, it immediately fell into a disadvantageous position. Long Yu used the power of the netherworld divine characters of death to condense the heavenly mandate divine light, which suddenly exploded on top of the pitch-black ape's head. In an instant, the pitch-black ape's body exploded. In just an instant, Long Yu scattered the pitch-black ape. This scene shocked Hui Yuan Bai and the hundreds of subordinates of the Nightmare Legion. Even Shu Chan and Long Yu himself were stunned on the spot. Wasn't this too exaggerated? The pitch-black ape that chased after Hui Yuan Bai, an expert of the Seven Paths Divine Realm, was scattered by Long Yu in just one move. No matter how they thought about it, it was unbelievable. However, it really happened in front of everyone, and they had no choice but to believe it. Just when everyone had just breathed a sigh of relief, the power of the divine characters of death suddenly condensed into a whirlwind, blowing everyone into the depths of Death Valley. This whirlwind of the power of the divine characters of death came very suddenly and was extremely violent. It seemed to have been formed after the pitch-black ape exploded. As strong as Hui Yuan Bai, Shu Chan, and the others had no ability to resist and were directly blown into the depths of Death Valley. Netherworld divine characters, break for me. Long Yu reacted immediately. When he knew that the power of his netherworld divine characters could greatly suppress the power of the divine characters of death. He knew that his ability to survive in this Death Valley was far stronger than others. 9 nether divine characters condensed all over his body, condensing into 4 ancient afterimages, each of which performed the Nether Dragon 9 explosions martial skill. The power of the endless 9 nether divine characters immediately condensed into 9 nether dragon phantoms, and accompanied by continuous dragon roars, they suddenly swept out. The power of the divine runes of death that came into contact with the 9 underworld's dragon's phantom was pushed back. However, the power of the divine runes of death suddenly condensed around Long Yu. It was still the same pitch-black ape from before. The giant ape, who was more than 10 feet tall, grabbed Long Yu and ran toward the depths of Death Valley. The entire Death Valley was stirred up by the spreading power of the 9 nether divine characters. All the power of the divine characters of death shrank back into the depths of the Death Valley. Before long, Shu Chan, Yuan Bai, and the others stood in the empty place, looking at each other. What appeared in front of them was a huge valley without the power of the divine characters of death. The valley was barren, and there were almost no weeds. The flowers of death that occasionally appeared had rapidly withered due to the disappearance of the power of the divine characters of death. In the center of the entire valley, there was a pitch-black entrance to an underground cave. Just now, Long Yu had been grabbed by the pitch-black ape and directly brought into this underground cave. The power of the divine characters of death in the entire valley had similarly shrunk and gathered in this underground cave. It could be seen that the source of the divine characters of death was in this underground cave. Shu Chan, Hui Yuan Bai, and the hundreds of people of the Nightmare Corps had all been rescued. Unfortunately, Long Yu had been captured by the pitch-black ape. General Hua, we can't turn a blind eye to little brother Long being captured. In my opinion, we should directly barge into that cave and see what exactly is inside. One of the burly deputy generals of the Nightmare Corps said solemnly to Hui Yuan Bai. Hui Yuan Bai stroked his beard and frowned slightly. Now that the outside of Death Valley has been sealed by the people of the Tianqin dynasty and the Ghost Evil Prefecture, we can't get out anyway. It's a waste of time to stay here. Naturally, we have to enter the cave. However, You don't need to enter. This old man can go in alone. General, how can we do that? The deputy general's expression changed drastically. Why not? Hui Yuanbai asked in a deep voice. If there's any danger in the cave, even if you follow me, it might not be of any use. However, if there's no danger, I can go alone. Why do you need to take the risk with me? General Hua, I'll go with you. The little princess, Shu Chan, was naturally worried about Long Yu. Moreover, unlike Hui Yuanbai, she did not have hundreds of troops to worry about, so no one present could stop her from going forward. She only said one sentence to Hui Yuanbai and stepped forward. Soon, she reached the edge of the pitch-black underground cave. The entrance to the pitch-black underground cave was huge and circular. Standing beside it, Shu Chan looked like a green onion on a flatbread, inconspicuous. Shu Chan looked into the underground cave, but all she saw was darkness. She did not see anyone, not to mention Long Yu and the pitch-black ape. She did not even sense a trace of the power of the divine rune of death. Hui Yuanbai immediately followed. After exchanging glances with Shu Chan, he jumped into the pitch-black underground cave and activated the power in his body to slowly float down. Not far away, hundreds of Nightmare Legion's martial cultivators wanted to follow them, but they were stopped by the strong deputy general. Although the deputy general was also worried about Hui Yuanbai's safety, Hui Yuanbai's order was a military order to him. Military orders could not be disobeyed. General asked us to guard here, so we'll guard here. If the bastards from Tianqin Dynasty and Ghost Evil Prefecture dare to break in, we'll guard the cave entrance with our lives. Don't let them in. The strong deputy general ordered sternly, causing the hundreds of Nightmare Legion's martial practitioners to stand up straight with solemn expressions. Yes. Thus, no one followed Shu Chan and Hui Yuanbai into the pitch-black cave. It could be seen that Hui Yuanbai's prestige among the Nightmare Corps martial cultivators was extremely respected. But soon, they found it strange that Shu Chan and Hui Yuanbai had actually floated up from the pitch-black cave. Both of them did not look well. This cave is just an underground cave. There are no other exits. I don't know where little brother Long has been taken to. Hui Yuanbai's expression was extremely unsightly. He had always admired Long Yu, and just now, he had astonishingly blown up the pitch-black ape. However, he did not expect such an unforeseen event to occur, causing Long Yu to disappear after being captured into the underground cave. Shu Chan's expression was also very bad. She had asked Long Yu to come out to train, but she did not expect such an accident to happen. At this moment, she felt very guilty. If she had known this would happen, she would not have come to Death Valley. Although he had seen Hui Yuanbai, he was trapped in Death Valley together with Hui Yuanbai, unable to leave. Not to mention Long Yu, who had been dragged into a mysterious cave by an ape formed from divine runes of death. Whether or not Long Yu would be able to come out of such a terrifying place was already an unknown. At this moment, Long Yu finally woke up from his coma. Before he opened his eyes, he felt that he had been completely surrounded by the power of the divine characters of death. He was surrounded by a strange and dense aura, which made him shudder. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in a valley formed by the power of the divine characters of death. This valley was not big. In fact, it was very small. Long Yu could touch the edge of the valley with just a few steps. Looking around, it was only a small place with a radius of less than 100 zhong. However, Long Yu did not know how he had arrived here. He only remembered that when he released the power of the divine characters of Nine Nether and blew up the pitch-black ape, a gust of death wind swept over and condensed into another pitch-black ape, which grabbed him and took him away. Subsequently, he lost consciousness. When he woke up, he was already in this place. Welcome to Death Valley. An incomparably dense voice suddenly sounded in Long Yu's ears, causing Long Yu to jump in fright. Looking in the direction of the voice, Long Yu saw a figure in a gray robe appear in the center of this small valley. The gray figure looked extremely eerie, especially since it was only a phantom, which made people feel as if they had encountered a ghost. "Who are you?" Long Yu asked straightforwardly and cautiously. "This is Death Valley. Where did I come from?" You were just in the periphery of Death Valley. It was just that the power of the divine characters of Death leaked out a little, which resulted in Death Valley. Now, you are in the real Death Valley, the gray figure said in a strange voice. Although his eyes could not be seen under the gray robe, Long Yu felt that this person was staring at him. The real Death Valley? Long Yu frowned slightly. It seemed that the place he and Shu-chan had just entered was only the periphery of Death Valley. That pitch-black ape was most likely just a spiritual body outside Death Valley, and its existence was specially to guard the real Death Valley. That kind of pitch-black ape would become stronger when facing strong opponents and weaker opponents. It was definitely not something that ordinary martial cultivators could deal with. Even if an expert from the Emperor Path Mystic Realm came, he might not necessarily be a match for the pitch-black ape. Moreover, if he wanted to come to the real Death Valley, he would probably need the help of that pitch-black ape. What is your purpose for bringing me here? Long Yu continued to ask. Of course, there's only one purpose, and that is to kill you. The gray figure smiled eerily, then raised his hand, and a wave of the power of the divine characters of death condensed in his hand. When Long Yu heard what the other party said, he could not help but feel puzzled. Did this guy bring him to the real Death Valley to kill him? But if he wanted to kill me, why didn't this person attack me when I was unconscious for so long? What was the reason? Moreover, the strangest thing was that Long Yu could not sense any information from this gray figure at all. He could not even sense his martial realm. Even if it was other Emperor Realm experts, such as Emperor Tianxin, Yuhan Xin, etc., Long Yu could roughly guess their strength. But when facing the gray figure in front of him, Long Yu could not figure out the other party's martial realm at all. Someone who can exist in Death Valley is definitely not an ordinary person. Just from the fact that Death Valley has existed for hundreds of years, this person is definitely not simple. Chapter 608. Facing the incomparably mysterious gray-robed martial cultivator Shadow, Long Yu was on full alert. Let's test it out first. Long Yu thought to himself as he charged toward the gray-robed figure with the void nether dragon blade in hand. He crossed the distance of several dozen meters in the blink of an eye. Then, the power of the rainbow devouring runes spread out from his body and swept toward his opponent. The power of the rainbow devouring runes could absorb the power of all divine runes and convert a part of it into Long Yu's own power. It was an excellent way to weaken an opponent. The gray-robed figure seemed to chuckle and raised his hand. A wave of the power of the divine runes of death condensed in his hand and blocked the attack of the rainbow devouring runes. Whether it was the amount of power of the divine runes of death or the angle of the attack, it was impeccable. It had just canceled out Long Yu's rainbow-devouring runes. This scene caused Long Yu to be extremely vigilant in his heart. None of his previous opponents had ever dealt with him in such a manner. His opponent's control over his power had almost reached the acme of perfection. As long as he had the ability to block the attack, he would not waste the slightest bit of power. This caused Long Yu to be vigilant, and at the same time, he was enlightened. When in battle, one's profound energy, laws, and divine runes were not inexhaustible. Therefore, one had to use them sparingly at all times and not waste any. Judging from the way the gray-robed figure fought, it was obvious that he was no weaker than an Emperor Realm or even a great Emperor Realm expert. However, Long Yu could not see through his opponent's martial realm. It's my turn now. The gray-robed figure saw that Long Yu had become vigilant and laughed softly. He then took a step forward. Just this step seemed to cross an immeasurable distance. The power of the divine runes of death arrived in front of Long Yu in the next instant. The sudden appearance of the gray-robed figure caused Long Yu's heart to skip a beat. He used the dragon sparrow flash as fast as he could. Just as he stepped into the strange space and his body became translucent, the power of the divine runes of death passed through his body. If he had not used the dragon sparrow flash in time, he would have been corroded by the divine runes of death. Ancient shadow, appear! Long Yu roared, directly condensing 4 ancient phantoms that scattered in all directions. Following which, he relied on the spatial power of the nether void dragon blade to teleport himself and one of the phantoms. Immediately afterward, Long Yu's main body and the four desolate ancient shadows turned around and attacked the gray-robed figure that was surrounded in the middle. They each executed the blood sacrifice shadow kill technique of the desolate ancient shadow kill. The small black-red figures carried boundless killing intent and instantly arrived in front of the gray-robed figure, wanting to attack his body. However, in the next moment, the gray-robed figure smirked. He raised his hand, and divine characters of death condensed in his hand, forming something similar to the Sword of Samsara. Sword of Death. He brandished the sword with divine runes of death in his hand, shattering all of the blood sacrifice shadow kill that Long Yu had unleashed, leaving nothing behind. Meanwhile, Long Yu's heart sank to the bottom of the valley as he looked at the long sword formed with divine runes of death. Because this method was very similar to the method he used to condense the Sword of Samsara, it was the awakening palm of Samsara martial skill. Even if it wasn't too far off. It was simply a long sword formed with divine runes of death. This caused Long Yu the same shock he felt when he saw the mysterious woman, Consort Yu, appear with his own eyes. This person is definitely not someone from Shunwu World. He must be related to the Dragon of Nine Underworld in some way. That was what Long Yu was thinking. But he didn't have the time to think about it, because the gray-robed figure wielded the Sword of Death and was already charging towards him. The aura of the divine runes of death filled the entire area, causing Long Yu to tremble uncontrollably. This was the true aura of death, several times more profound than the divine runes of Nine Underworld that he had comprehended and the Azura divine runes that Shu Chan had comprehended. This was definitely an existence that had reached an extremely high level of compatibility with the divine runes of death. No, I can't retreat. Long Yu had originally wanted to temporarily avoid the attack. However, he clenched his teeth and decided to face his opponent head-on. Although his opponent's methods were extremely profound, his martial arts realm was not that high. If not, he would have long since killed Long Yu. There is only one way to defeat the gray-robed figure, and that was to weaken it to the limit and kill it in one strike. Dragon roared, darkening sky snow, realm of Huang Quan. Long Yu directly used these two domain martial skills, turning the entire valley into his domain. Following the dragon's roar, black snowflakes began to fall. The aura of Huang Quan began to spread. Long Yu's strength was further increased, while the gray-robed figure's power was suppressed by 10%. Right after that, Long Yu unleashed all of the divine runes on his body, forming a long dragon that roared like a dragon from Nine Underworld. It completely wrapped around the gray-robed figure and began to absorb its power. The Sword of Samsara also appeared in Long Yu's hand, and he began to brandish the sword chi of Samsara towards his opponent. Under Long Yu's various attacks, the gray-robed figure's strength was reduced by at least 30%, and this was the limit of what Long Yu could do now. 9 Underworld Explosions. Long Yu immediately used the 9 Underworld Explosions. The 4 ancient shadows each used the first 8 dragon explosions, and Long Yu alone used the last one, Heaven Underworld Explosion. The dragon's roar resounded throughout the valley, and as Long Yu's divine runes of 9 underworlds surged and boiled, the gray-robed figure in the center, who was being attacked, didn't panic at all. He just raised his hand and gradually gathered the power of the divine runes of death in his hand. Faced with Long Yu's continuous weakening and tyrannical bombardment of martial skills, this person didn't choose to defend, but to counterattack. As the power of the divine runes of death condensed, the aura of the divine runes of space also drifted out, and then the gray-robed figure disappeared and suddenly appeared behind Long Yu. Go! When Long Yu sensed the opponent's aura appear behind him, he immediately used the Nether Dragon Blade's divine runes of space to move to a nearby ancient shadow. Then he saw that the ancient shadow that had swapped places with him was corroded by the power of the divine runes of death in the gray-robed figure's hand. With just the right amount of power, the ancient shadow lost the ability to fight. At this moment, the 9 underworld explosions finally finished condensing, and they landed on the head of the gray-robed figure. This time, something even more shocking to Long Yu happened. The power of the divine runes of death used an extremely mysterious structure to form a layer of crystal shield. Although it was only a thin layer, it managed to block all of Long Yu's attacks. Divine runes, divine chains. Long Yu's pupils shrank as he looked at the opponent's manipulation of the power of the divine runes of death. He felt that it was a little similar to the condensation of divine chains, but it was clearly a higher-level technique. If it were an opponent at the same martial realm as Long Yu, they probably wouldn't be able to fight against Long Yu even if they used divine chains. However, this gray-robed figure had used a small amount of the power of the divine runes of death to block Long Yu's 9 underworld explosions. Moreover, he had used the 9 underworld explosions in tandem with the ancient shadow. Although the power of the 9 underworld explosions was lower than when he used it alone, the combined power was unfathomable. It was enough to instantly kill a 4-path divine ability realm expert. Even the Nether Dragon 9 underworld explosions, the final explosion of the 9 underworld explosions, condensed countless evil spirits and souls into a black ball of light. The power of this black ball of light was enough for Long Yu to heavily injure Tai Sun, who was at the 3-path divine ability realm, when he was at the heavenly tribulation realm. But now, it was easily blocked by the crystal shield formed by the divine runes of death. In fact, it was even directly dissolved. You're exhausted so quickly? It looks like I've overestimated you. Seeing that Long Yu seemed to be exhausted, the gray-robed figure chuckled once more. This chuckle was like the sound of death that came from the yellow springs of hell. Following that, the power of the divine runes of death tightly enveloped Long Yu and the remaining 3 primordial ancient shadows. Kill! Long Yu suddenly let out a furious roar. Together with the 3 ancient shadows, he forcefully rushed towards the gray-robed figure. The gray-robed figure's usage of the divine runes of death was simply superb. Furthermore, he possessed an unparalleled speed that even Long Yu couldn't match. After all, he had comprehended some kind of spatial divine rune. It seemed impossible to defeat the gray-robed figure now. However, Long Yu still wanted to make one last attempt. How foolish of you to act so recklessly. The gray-robed figure smirked. The power of the divine runes of death rose from his body and gradually condensed into a dragon of death. With a flick of its tail, the dragon flung one of the ancient shadows away. Even more power of the divine runes of death condensed and descended, scattering the other 2 ancient shadows of Long Yu. As for Long Yu himself, the power of the divine runes of death also began to corrode him. Even the power of the divine runes of 9 underworlds in his body couldn't stop the corrosion of the divine runes of death. This was because the opponent's usage of the divine runes of death was too strong. However, Long Yu didn't retreat. Instead, he erupted with a terrifying speed and instantly appeared in front of the gray-robed figure, standing face-to-face with him at close range. Foolish, the gray-robed figure said indifferently. Then he raised his hand. The power of the divine runes of death erupted and completely corroded Long Yu's body. However, at this moment, Long Yu held the void Nether Dragon Blade in his hand and directly used the soul explosion. Previously, when Long Yu was facing the pursuers of Prince Cloud, he absorbed the soul seals of 6 people, which increased the power of the void Nether Dragon Blade by more than 3 times. At this moment, when he used the soul explosion, the soul seals of these 6 people exploded. Long Yu didn't care about the soul explosion at close range. It would also cause great damage to himself. His top priority now was to eliminate the gray-robed figure. Otherwise, he would die without a doubt. In the next moment, the soul explosion exploded. Long Yu bore the brunt of it and was blasted dozens of feet away. He fell heavily into the valley. Coupled with the destruction of the divine runes of death in his body, he was in a very bad situation. If it weren't for the divine runes of 9 Nether that had tempered his meridians and the divine runes of self-healing, he would have died by now. However, The gray-robed figure didn't seem to be in a good state either. He didn't expect Long Yu to use a killing move at such a close range. Long Yu didn't care that he would also be injured. This kind of mutual destruction was really out of the gray-robed figure's expectation. Chapter 609. At the same time that Long Yu suffered a heavy injury, the gray-robed figure was blasted apart by the soul explosion of the Void Dragon's blade, and it gradually collapsed. The healing divine markings started to play an enormous role, and it wasn't long before Long Yu stood up once more. His eyes carried vigilance as he glanced at the surroundings. Yet he noticed that the energy of the deathly divine markings in the gorge had actually started to converge towards a single spot, and a gray-robed figure condensed into appearance, once more the spot where the energy of the deathly divine markings converged. However, this gray-robed figure wasn't a phantom this time, and it was like a material existence. Moreover, when it condensed into form this time, it practically absorbed the energy of the deathly divine markings in the entire Death Gorge. Not bad. Even though you've suffered a heavy injury, you're able to make me feel a trace of threat at any rate. You've passed. What's your name? The gray-robed figure smiled lightly as he asked Long Yu. Long Yu was instantly bewildered when he heard this question. What does he mean by I've passed? Moreover, why is he asking for my name now? Let me introduce myself first. I'm the death envoy of one of the 4 emissaries of the 9th Hell. Since you're from the 9th Hell tribe, you ought to have heard of my name, right? The gray-robed figure spoke indifferently. Long Yu's heart instantly shook when he heard this, and he knew that he'd encountered an existence related to the dragon of the 9th Hell. Could it be that the death envoy of one of the 4 emissaries of the 9th Hell is one of the 4 subordinates of the dragon of the 9th Hell? I'm very sorry, I'm not from the 9th Hell tribe. However, I was born with the dragon seal of the 9th Hell on my chest, so I know of the existence of the 9th Hell tribe. Long Yu spoke bluntly. He'd never heard of the 4 emissaries of the 9th Hell tribe, and if he were to pretend to be from the 9th Hell tribe, then the gray-robed figure would probably see through him. So he might as well speak truthfully. The gray-robed figure was slightly surprised when he heard Long Yu. Could it be that you were accidentally abandoned by the 9th Hell tribe? However, there are inherited memories within the dragon seal of the 9th Hell, so growing in the 9th Hell tribe doesn't affect your advancement in the martial Tao. The gray-robed figure went on to say a lot, and Long Yu finally understood that this death envoy, who claimed to be one of the 4 envoys of the 9 underworlds, was one of the 4 great subordinates of the dragon of the 9 underworlds. However, they died together with the dragon of the 9 underworlds. The gray-robed figure that appeared in front of Long Yu now was only a spiritual projection of the death envoy after its death. It was the same existence as the first Azura prefecture king in the Azura ancient palace. Of course, the death envoy's cultivation was much higher than the first Azura king's, so his remnant consciousness had been preserved in this world for tens of thousands of years. The Nine Abyss tribe is a martial cultivator tribe inherited from the dragon of Nine Abyss, living in a space independent of Shunwu world, not known to outsiders for generations, able to borrow the power of the dragon of Nine Abyss from birth. Although the dragon of Nine Underworld had fallen, due to its overwhelming cultivation, its power was not extinguished. The 9 Underworld tribe that obtained its inheritance became the strongest force in the entire Shunwu world. Do you know what the Shunwu world is? The gray-robed figure, the death envoy, asked Long Yu. Hearing that, Long Yu frowned. Shunwu world, what kind of thing is it? I've never thought about that before. He really hadn't thought about that before. For example, when he was living on the Heavenly Mandate continent, he didn't think about what the Heavenly Mandate continent was either. Shunwu world is only a small world of Geo Dragon Emperor. The corner of the messenger of death's lips curled up as he said, You have just stepped in the mystery realm, but I'm sure you know that the Emperor Path Arcane Realm cultivators have inner worlds inside their bodies. However, these inner worlds are incomplete. But when Emperor Path Secret Realm martial cultivators take a step further and step into a higher realm, they can turn this inner world into a real small world. After Geo Dragon Emperor fell, his small world still exists. This is the biggest difference between a small world and an inner world. This Shenwu world is Geo Dragon Emperor's small world. In other words, right now, we, as well as everyone you know, are only living in Geo Dragon Emperor's small world. As these words fell into Long Yu's ears, he was completely shocked. Shenwu world is only a small world of Geo Dragon Emperor? If that's the case, then the beyond the sky that Shenwu world's martial cultivators speak of is the real world. Of course, what I'm saying right now is too far away for you, so you don't need to mind it too much, the Death Envoy continued. In the past, quite a few Nine Serenities tribe martial cultivators came to Death Valley, but none of them were able to stop me, who was at the same realm as them. It seems that innate power isn't a good thing for martial cultivators. In the end, you need to be like you, to grow up in iron and blood. Only then will your battle prowess be a bit stronger. Since you've defeated my projection, you have the qualifications to receive the true inheritance of Geo Dragon Emperor. Of course, the true inheritance of Geo Dragon Emperor requires the approval of all 4 Nine Serenities messengers. And right now, you've only received my approval. The Death Envoy chuckled. Near the Death Valley, there's an Azura abyss. The Azura Envoy was buried in that abyss. However, that guy seems to have died. Not even his remnant consciousness was left behind. There's actually a Shura Envoy in the Shura Abyss, and he's also one of the 4 Nine Serenities messengers. Furthermore, from the Death Envoy's words, the Shura Envoy seems to have been completely wiped out. This is probably the reason why the Azura Duke was able to obtain the Azura Divine runes from it. Alright, from now on, I, the Envoy of Death, will possess your battle weapon and guide you in your cultivation. Speaking of which, this Ancient Supreme rank battle weapon is of pretty good quality. Where did you get it from? The Death Envoy looked at the Nether Void Dragon Blade in Long Yu's hand and casually asked. I was just about to ask Senior. Long Yu slightly frowned and asked, Does Senior know a girl called Consort Yu? Consort Yu, the Death Envoy shook his head. I don't know her. It's been so many years since the fall of Geo Dragon Emperor. Even I was in a state of nothingness for a period of time, so I can't remember it all. The Consort you speak of should be the one who forged this combat weapon for you, right? That's right, it's her. She should be someone from beyond the heavens. Long Yu said, I don't know why she helped me. Could it be because of Geo Dragon Emperor? You don't need to think too much about this. Since she chose to help you, she won't do anything bad to you. When your martial realm reaches a certain level, you will eventually know the truth. The Death Envoy lightly said, Now, you can try to comprehend the divine runes of death. Comprehend the divine runes of death? Long Yu's heart moved. He looked at the Death Envoy with doubt. The divine rune of death is an ability that I, the Death Envoy, possess. In this true Death Valley, the divine rune of death is everywhere. Moreover, it is the power of the original divine rune that originates from the divine rune source. If you can comprehend it, it will be a power that belongs to you. The Death Envoy said, There's no hurry to comprehend the divine runes for now. Long Yu solemnly said, In the outside Death Valley, there's still many of my friends. Senior, can you guarantee their safety? You mean the thousands of people who try to break into Death Valley? Hearing this, the Death Envoy contemptuously smiled. They tried to break into Death Valley, an unforgivable crime. But since you have spoken, then let them go. Don't worry, I have already used the divine runes of death to protect them. But if they want to come to this true Death Valley, they won't be able to do so unless you can comprehend the divine runes of death. Then I, the Death Envoy, will be completely willing to follow you and listen to your orders. Hearing this, Long Yu, of course, knew that this was another test from the Death Envoy. Although he didn't know what the Death Envoy wanted to help him with, since it was like this, he couldn't miss this opportunity. Comprehending the divine runes of death would also be of great benefit to him. The divine runes of death is a kind of shadow attribute divine runes. If you can comprehend it and use it, you can directly cut off your opponent's vitality, killing them without leaving a trace. While speaking, the Death Envoy pointed out to Long Yu, If you want to comprehend the divine runes of death, you must first have a deep understanding of death. Boy, have you ever been in a state of near death? On second thought, Long Yu thought, when he transmigrated to this world, wasn't he in a state of near death? With regards to death, Long Yu could not be said to not have a deep understanding. If you have, comprehending the divine runes of death shouldn't be a problem. If not, then it will depend on your talent. Or, I can let you immerse yourself in a mental illusion of near death. Of course, if you can endure it, then you will really die. The Death Envoy said with a hint of playfulness. If that's the case, then I naturally want to experience the state of near death. The corner of Long Yu's mouth curled up slightly, and he said fearlessly, "How dare you?" The Death Envoy clicked his tongue. If that's the case, then let's begin. Get ready. As soon as he finished speaking, the Death Envoy's figure in a gray robe suddenly moved, and countless divine runes of death shrouded Long Yu. Just as Long Yu was speaking with the Death Envoy in the Valley of Death, outside in the Valley of Death, Shu Chan and Hui Yuan Bai were extremely anxious. Long Yu had been taken away by the Black Ape, and his whereabouts were unknown. The pitch-black cave in front of them was a straight path, and there was no other way forward. Behind them, the power of the divine runes of death gradually condensed, forming a thick layer of death fog barrier, completely sealing off their escape route. The strange thing was that the place where they were standing was not invaded by the divine runes of death. This situation, could it be that the power of the divine runes of death is protecting us from being killed by the enemies? Hui Yuanbai saw this, and his expression changed slightly as he guessed. Shu Chan squinted her eyes and observed the trajectory of the divine runes of death around them. She slowly nodded and said, "Maybe Long Yu had some fortuitous encounter. For the time being, we should not be in danger." Even if the Tianqin dynasty and Ghost Evil Prefecture martial cultivators outside barged in, they would not be able to find us, and would instead be corroded to death by the divine runes of death. Next, we should rest well and wait for Long Yu's news. Chapter 610. In Death Valley, Long Yu quickly began to comprehend the divine runes of death. According to the Death Envoy, the divine runes of death in Death Valley were the same as the divine rune source. If one could comprehend them, it would be the strongest divine rune power, similar to the 9 Nether Divine Rune and Siphon Divine Rune that Long Yu had already comprehended. The divine runes of death could control death to a certain extent. In a situation where the difference in strength wasn't too great, one could even use the divine runes of death to directly extract the vitality of the opponent, causing them to fall into a state of death. Of course, this required one to completely comprehend the divine runes of death and even use them to a superb degree. For example, the defensive method that the Death Envoy used just now was called a divine formation. The use of the power of the divine runes, from the initial pure use of the power of the divine runes to condensing it into innate supernatural powers, were only elementary methods. Above, that was the method of condensing divine chains that could be learned after reaching the 5th level of compatibility with the divine runes. Long Yu had seen this method before. The Azura Duke, Emperor Tianqin, Yuhan Xin, and others were all very familiar with the method of condensing divine chains. Even Shu Chan was trying to comprehend it, but she hadn't succeeded yet. The power of the divine runes was the most primitive and tyrannical power in the world. Of course, there were more than these methods. Above innate supernatural powers and divine chains, there was an even stronger method, divine formations. From innate supernatural powers to divine chains, and then to divine formations, it was a process of constantly improving the use of the divine runes. In terms of power, the power of divine chains was at least 10 times that of innate supernatural powers, and the power of divine formations was 10 times that of divine chains. In other words, if one could use divine formations, the power they could display was at least 100 times greater than using innate supernatural powers. Of course, it wasn't easy to learn the methods of divine formations. At the very least, the current Long Yu couldn't do it. He hadn't even reached the 5th level of compatibility with the divine runes, much less divine formations. In order to learn the methods of divine formations, one had to at least reach the 9th level of compatibility with the divine runes. This was also the highest degree of compatibility a martial cultivator could achieve with the divine runes. The Death Envoy said that even in the world where the Juyo Dragon Emperor lived, martial practitioners who could reach the 9th level of compatibility with the divine text were considered geniuses and were rarely seen. That's why divine formations, let alone a small Juyo Dragon Emperor world like Shenwu world, even in the Beyond Heaven world, it's an extremely rare and powerful technique. Regardless of whether it was the God Chains or the God Arrays, they were not things that Long Yu needed to consider. The situation he was facing now was merely to comprehend the divine text of death. However, just this point alone was already extremely difficult. Unlike the 9 Nether Divine characters and the Siphon Divine characters, the power of these 2 divine characters was stored within the Ancient Dragon Bone Tower. Long Yu was compatible with the Ancient Dragon Bone Tower, so he was able to gradually comprehend these 2 powers. Of course, the prerequisite for this was that Long Yu had to be compatible with the Shadow and Life attribute divine runes. Although it was only at the 1st level of compatibility at the time, dual attribute compatibility was still relatively rare in the Shenwu world. But now, the divine text of death that Long Yu was facing was the same as comprehending it in the divine rune origin. It was extremely difficult. Even for a martial cultivator of the Beyond Heaven world, wanting to directly comprehend the divine text in the divine rune origin was extremely difficult. Compatibility with the attribute of the divine rune determined whether or not a martial cultivator could comprehend the divine rune. And the speed at which one comprehended the divine rune was related to the martial cultivator's talent, the degree of compatibility with the divine rune, and the nature of the power of the divine rune. The power of the divine rune in the divine rune origin was publicly recognized as the most difficult to comprehend. Even if one reached the 5th level of compatibility with the divine rune and could condense the God Chains, it would still take at least 7 days to comprehend the first 10,000th of it. Under the Death Envoy's illusion of death, Long Yu had to experience the feeling of near death at least 10 times a day. There was pain, there was despair, there was struggle, there was every one of these feelings that were hard to forget. And this also deepened Long Yu's understanding of death. Although he had experienced death before crossing into this world, that was only a single experience. But now, under the Death Envoy's illusion of death, every time Long Yu experienced it, it was as if he was truly near death. This caused Long Yu's comprehension of the divine rune of death to deepen. Although he still hadn't successfully comprehended it, his progress was still gratifying. On the 7th day, Long Yu successfully mobilized a trace of the power of the divine rune of death in Death Valley, leaving the Death Envoy very satisfied. In just 7 days, you were able to comprehend 1/10,000th of the power of the divine rune of death. Your talent is quite good. The Death Envoy lightly said, however, 1/10,000th of the power of the divine rune of death isn't anything at all. With your current degree of compatibility with the 4th level of the Umbra attribute divine rune, I believe you will be able to comprehend 1/10,000th of the power of the divine rune of death in a month. At that time, I will speak to you about other matters. 1 month. Long Yu's thoughts stirred. He thought that this was far too long. But in any case, Shu Chan, Yuan Bai, and the others weren't in any danger. Cultivating here was also cultivating, and no one would disturb him. The environment was quite good. Then let's cultivate for a month first. Long Yu nodded. The Death Envoy closed his eyes in satisfaction. The Death Envoy continued to add the illusion of death to Long Yu, deepening his comprehension of death. A month's time passed by quickly. In this 1 month, Long Yu experienced over 1,000 different feelings of death. His comprehension of the divine rune of death had finally reached 1,000th of the power of the divine rune of death. At this moment, Long Yu could already successfully use the divine rune of death. He could feel that if he were to face a transcendent realm martial cultivator at the same level as him, He wouldn't need any fancy tricks. He could directly use the divine rune of death to kill his opponent. This was the power of the divine rune of death, the most overbearing power of the world. In particular, the divine rune of death that Long Yu had comprehended was equivalent to comprehending the third level of the divine rune origin. It was the strongest level of divine rune power. Although Long Yu only needed to comprehend 1/10 of the power of the divine rune of death to be able to use it to condense his innate transcendent powers, it was impossible for Long Yu to spend a year in Death Valley to comprehend the power of the divine rune. Even if Long Yu wanted to do so, the Death Envoy wouldn't allow it. When Juyo Dragon Emperor was alive, he had over 3,000 disciples, and he never approved of any disciple cultivating in seclusion. The Death Envoy said, "There is no other way to improve one's combat strength other than through battles. Only by experiencing enough battles can one emerge from a sea of blood and a mountain of corpses and become an expert of a generation. Therefore, from now on, I will bring Death Valley with me and follow you to train. You don't need to have any expectations of me. No matter what danger you encounter, I will not appear to save you. However, when you need to comprehend the divine rune of death, I will appear by your side. Bring Death Valley with me?" Long Yu was startled when he heard this. He subconsciously looked around. Could it be that he could take away Death Valley? You can easily do that with that top-ranked ancient weapon in your hand. However, as the Death Envoy, I will naturally not rely on a junior's belongings. The Death Envoy laughed softly. He raised his hands under his gray robe, and the whole Death Valley began to shake. The power of the divine rune of death began to gather in his body. Long Yu staggered and subconsciously urged the Xian Qi in his body to make himself float in the air. At a glance, he saw that the whole Death Valley was floating along with him. "Go!" The Death Envoy scolded. Long Yu felt his vision blurred, and the next moment, he appeared in another place. He glanced around and found that he was in a huge underground cave. He instantly understood that he was now under Shu Chan and Hui Yuan Bai. However, this underground cave was probably thousands of feet deep, and with his current cultivation, it was impossible for him to break through. The next moment, the underground cave shook violently, and a huge palace with an incomparably gloomy aura of death rose from the ground. "Oh, right, the ancient palace." Seeing this, Long Yu's eyes suddenly lit up as if he remembered something. Since the Shura province originated from the Shura Abyss, and the Shura Abyss was also the burial place of the Shura Envoy, one of the 9 nether envoys under the Juyo Dragon Emperor, then the ancient Azura Palace should be the Shura Envoy's possession, but it had been moved away. Now, it was normal for the Death Envoy to have his own ancient palace. Moreover, the Death Envoy and the ancient Death Palace had reached the highest realm, and it could be said that he could use all the functions of the ancient Death Palace, including extreme concealment. In just a blink of an eye, the huge ancient Death Palace in front of Long Yu, the gloomy palace that occupied his entire field of vision, disappeared just like that, as if it had never been there, or as if what Long Yu saw just now was a complete illusion. This ancient palace can actually become invisible. Then, if I am completely compatible with the ancient Azura Palace, Long Yu couldn't help but think to himself, the 9 nether envoys, every envoy has their own ancient palace. This is our residence, as well as our defensive weapons. These 4 ancient palaces were all personally crafted by the Juyo Dragon Emperor, and their functions are more or less the same. The Death Envoy's voice resounded in Long Yu's ears. If you're completely compatible with the ancient Azura Palace, of course you can also use it to hide your body. At least in this Shunwu world, no one will be able to find a trace of the ancient palace. Now, I will always be by your side. Until you die, only then will I return to this place. Of course, there's another very small possibility. That is, when you have the strength to step out of this world, I will always be by your side. The Death Envoy's words caused Long Yu to feel a sense of nervousness. This Death Envoy follows him like this, but doesn't protect him. Could it be to keep an eye on him, Long Yu? The Death Envoy's strength is too tyrannical, Long Yu can't resist, even if he wanted to, at least for now. He can only let the Death Envoy follow him. If you keep going forward from here, you will reach the core area of the Azura Abyss. There you could try to comprehend the Azura Divine Rune Source. If you succeed, it will be a decent boost to your strength, the Death Envoy continued to speak, and then Long Yu saw that in this several thousand feet underground, there really was an ancient passage that extended into the distance. Chapter 611. The Death Envoy and the ancient Death Palace disappeared from Long Yu's sight, leaving only an underground passage leading to the Azura Abyss in front of Long Yu. Since this place can lead directly to the Azura Abyss, doesn't that mean I can bypass the encirclement of the Tianqin dynasty and ghost evil county martial practitioners? Long Yu thought to himself. He knew that he had found a way to leave this place. Looking up, he saw a thick layer of soil. Shu Chan's current location was thousands of meters away from where she was. I'll go explore the Azura Abyss first. If there's no danger, I'll come back and call Shu Chan and Hui Yuan by to leave together. Long Yu made up his mind and walked towards the underground passage alone, towards the place where the Azura Abyss was. On one hand, Long Yu did not want others to know about the Death Envoy and the Azura Envoy. On the other hand, the Death Envoy, who was secretly monitoring him, would certainly not allow Long Yu to speak of this matter. Therefore, Long Yu had to conceal the truth about the underground Death Valley and the Azura Abyss. When the time came, he could just say that he had found the exit to the Azura Abyss, had some fortuitous encounters, and comprehended the divine runes of death and Azura. The underground passage was extremely dark and damp. No one had come here for tens of thousands of years. The Death Envoy said that there had been martial practitioners from the Ninetale tribe who had come here before, but none of them had passed the test and were directly killed. They most likely did not have the opportunity to set foot in this underground passage to the Azura Abyss. The passage was barren and gloomy. There were no plants or creatures, not even a weed, because no plants or animals could grow in a place where the divine runes of death spread. Even the flower of death could only grow in places where the divine runes of death were thinner. In the true Death Valley, only the ghost trees that the Death Envoy planted could grow, and they were also full of Yin energy. The deeper Long Yu went, the thinner the power of the divine runes of death became. Soon, a trace of the power of the divine runes of death came from ahead, causing Long Yu's spirit to rise. If he could feel the aura of the Azura divine runes, that meant the Azura Abyss wasn't too far away. This caused Long Yu to speed up. At the same time, he condensed the Sunflame laws to illuminate the underground channel. This place was dark and damp, gloomy and eerie. The stones on both sides had long been corroded by the power of death and Azura divine runes. If these stones could be dug out, they could be used to refine a decent combat weapon. At the very least, it would be a heaven-grade combat weapon that carried the power of death and Azura divine runes. Unfortunately, there was no way for anyone to take away the stones in the underground tunnel. It must be known that this tunnel was located between the Death Valley and the Azura Abyss. Ordinary martial cultivators, even Emperor Tianqin, could not enter this place. Long Yu, on the other hand, thought that if he could bring these stones out and refine them into battle weapons, it would greatly improve the people in the heavenly mandate manner. With that in mind, he held the nether dragon blade in his hand and stabbed it into the nearby stones. However, what shocked him was that even the nether dragon blade could not pierce through these stone walls. Don't waste your effort. These stone walls have been nourished by the death and Azura divine runes for thousands of years. They're no longer ordinary objects. With your abilities, you won't be able to take them down. Even if you did, no one in the Shunwu world would be able to refine them into battle weapons. The Death Envoy's voice came into Long Yu's ears with a hint of ridicule. However, I can help you with this. What kind of battle weapon do you want to refine these stone walls into? Just tell me. I'll help you. It will at least be a grand desolate grade 1. Senior, you're willing to help me? Long Yu squinted his eyes, looking a bit surprised. Of course. The Death Envoy said lightly. Then I can't ask for more. How about you refine these stone walls into sword-type battle weapons? Sword-type battle weapons are the most widely used. The refining method shouldn't be too complicated. Long Yu said after thinking for a bit. He didn't ask the Death Envoy why he was willing to help him. After all, the Death Envoy helping him refine a battle weapon wouldn't be bad for him. In fact, it would be beneficial for the Death Envoy as well. Perhaps the Death Envoy also wanted to see Long Yu's forces grow stronger so that he could help him in the future. With that in mind, Long Yu didn't feel any need to be grateful to the Death Envoy. Sword-type battle weapons are indeed the easiest to refine. However, to refine a grand desolate grade battle weapon, these Death Azura stones alone aren't enough. There are some special materials that you'll have to get from me after you leave this place. I'll tell you what you need then. The Death Envoy said with a light laugh. Okay, Long Yu nodded. Following that, the stone walls on both sides of the underground tunnel started to break down by a powerful force and slowly disappeared in front of Long Yu's eyes. He knew that the Death Envoy had taken these Death Azura stones and stored them in the Death Ancient Palace for safekeeping. Long Yu didn't pay much attention to it and continued to move forward. Not long after, he finally arrived at the end of the underground tunnel. As the Death Azura stones on both sides of the underground tunnel were taken away, the entire underground tunnel seemed to have widened by several times. However, Long Yu didn't care about that. Instead, he was more concerned about the scene that appeared in front of him. After arriving at the end of the underground tunnel, Long Yu arrived at the deepest part of an abyss. At the bottom of the abyss, there was also a huge underground cave. In the middle of the cave, there was a glowing bead floating in the air. Although the bead was emitting a light, it was an extremely eerie and strange light. It was completely emitting the aura of the Azura divine runes. What's this? Long Yu's question was naturally directed at the Death Envoy, who was hiding in the dark. This is the Azura Source Stone condensed from the Azura divine runes. The Death Envoy explained in a desolate tone. The Azura emissary has been dead for many years. Back then, he suffered the most serious injuries and didn't even leave behind a remnant of his consciousness. All the essence in his body was condensed into this Azura Source Stone. Even the Azura Abyss was built by me for him. Senior, you must have a good relationship with the Azura emissary. Someone broke into the Azura Abyss and took away the Azura Divine Runes and the Azura Ancient Palace. Why didn't you stop them? Long Yu thought of this and asked, what's the use of stopping them? The Death Envoy laughed self-mockingly. We are already people of the past. When people die, the lights go out. This is the rule of the world. It is their fate that someone can take away the Azura Ancient Palace and the Azura Divine Runes. Only this Azura Source Stone. I will not let it fall into the hands of anyone. Fortunately, the Azura Ancient Palace is in your hands. There is also that little girl outside. The two of you have good fate. This Azura Source Stone is now in your hands. In the future, you can use it to comprehend the Azura Divine Runes. Moreover, it is the strongest Azura Divine Runes. It will greatly increase your strength. As the Death Envoy spoke, Long Yu saw the Azura Source Stone floating towards him. It was clearly controlled by the Death Envoy. Hearing the Death Envoy's words, Long Yu took out the Nether Void Dragon Blade and used the power of space to store the Azura Source Stone in his storage space. Although he didn't have time to comprehend it, a similar Azura Source Stone could only be found by chance in the Beyond Heaven world. Long Yu naturally wouldn't let it go. As for handing it over to Shu Chan, Long Yu thought about it. However, he quickly dispelled the idea. Although Shu Chan was very good to him, it wasn't enough for Long Yu to trust everything about her. Now that the two of them had joined forces, it was only because they had a common goal. Once there was a conflict, it wasn't impossible for them to become enemies. Long Yu had seen this sort of thing happen too many times. Thus, he would never give something of his to a so-called friend. No matter what, increasing his own strength was the most important thing. As for helping Shu Chan, besides the Azura Source Stone, there were many other methods. For example, as Long Yu continued forward, he saw many remnant Azura divine runes in the depths of the Azura Abyss. Within the Azura Abyss, there was originally a total of 108 Azura divine runes that formed an Azura array formation to prevent outsiders from invading. However, the array formation lost its effectiveness after a long period of time, and the first Azura Duke was able to find an opportunity to take away more than 30 Azura divine runes. A single Azura divine rune could allow a sufficiently talented martial cultivator to comprehend the second level of Azura divine rune. The power of such divine runes was only inferior to the power of divine rune comprehended from the divine rune source stone or the divine rune source stone. Shu Chan, the previous Azura Duke, and the others all comprehended this power. If it weren't for the fact that after the Azura divine runes were taken away, the Azura array formation would have become extremely berserk. If it weren't for the remaining 70 Azura divine runes being taken away, it would have been impossible for them to remain. But now, Long Yu had taken advantage of all of them. Long Yu took them all into his bag. Divine runes were the power of divine runes carved down by the ancestors. One could comprehend the complete power of divine runes from them. A higher-level divine rune source could comprehend the essence of the divine runes, but a lower-level divine rune source could only comprehend a tenth of the divine rune's power. For example, Long Yu's hidden divine rune or the Northern Academy Master Bei, Tiany's fighting divine rune source. Divine runes could only be created by martial cultivators who had comprehended the essence of divine rune power from the divine rune source. Moreover, it required a great deal of resources and was not easy to obtain. Within the entire Shenwu world, divine runes were extremely precious existences. Besides the Death Valley and the Azura Abyss, it was impossible to find so many divine runes anywhere else in the entire Shenwu world. These divine runes were regarded by Long Yu as the greatest capital for the rise of Heavenly Mandate Manor. For a martial cultivator of the mystical realm, the power of divine runes was the foundation. If one could comprehend the complete Azura divine rune, their strength would not be any less than Shu Chan's. Of course, Shu Chan's talent was also quite good, and her compatibility with shadow attribute divine runes was also quite high. However, the Azura divine runes were the foundation for Shu Chan's strength. Chapter 612. In addition to the over 70 Azura divine runes, the Death Envoy could also make more divine runes of death at any time. However, the Death Envoy was only a remnant of his consciousness, so he could only use a little of his power. Especially making divine runes, the consumption was very high, much higher than making weapons. The Death Envoy already had 108 divine runes of death. He told Long Yu that if Long Yu needed them, he could give them all to him. Long Yu already had the Death Source Stone provided by the Death Envoy, so the divine runes of death were useless, but he could use them to train his own forces. There were a total of 180 divine runes of death and Azura divine runes. Whether it was the Heavenly Mandate Manor, the Azura Mansion, or the remaining hundreds of people under Hui Yuan Bai, most of them could get one. As long as they were given time, they would grow into a force that would shock the entire Shenwu world. Of course, Long Yu could not tell others about the existence of the Death Envoy. After all, Hui Yuan Bai had led thousands of people into Death Valley, and now only 100 people were left. This was all the work of the Death Envoy. However, he could say that he got the divine runes by accident, so it was not a problem to give them away. After Long Yu put away the Azura Source Stone and the over 70 Azura divine runes, he hurried back to pick up Shu Chan, Hui Yuan Bai, and the others. The martial practitioners of Tianqin Dynasty and Ghost Evil Prefecture were all guarding the entrance of Death Valley, so it would not be a problem to leave through Azura Abyss. As for the violent Azura divine rune formation power above Azura Abyss, the Death Envoy said that he could easily deal with it, so Long Yu could rest assured. However, after leaving Death Valley and Azura Abyss, the Death Envoy would not appear so frequently. Even if Long Yu was in mortal danger, he would not appear. Long Yu returned to the real Death Valley. The thousands of feet thick layer of soil above his head was still very difficult for him to deal with. Fortunately, in the past month, the Death Envoy had not only allowed Long Yu to experience near-death illusions, allowing him to comprehend 1,000th of the power of the Death Divine Rune, he had also given Long Yu many pointers on how to use martial skills, allowing Long Yu to suddenly see the light. This included 9 Underworld Heavenly Light. According to the Death Envoy, the 9 Nether Heavenly Light was a powerful martial skill that could destroy everything. Back then, the 9 Nether Dragon Emperor would often use this move. However, the 9 Underworld Heavenly Light cultivation method that appeared in Long Yu's mind was not the rune formation. The true 9 Underworld Heavenly Light was an extremely powerful martial technique that far surpassed the ancient era. It was a terrifying technique that allowed one to communicate with the ancient deities. It was not something that the current Long Yu could use. However, if you can master an archaic high-tier martial skill, you'll be invincible in the entire Shenwu world. On top of that, the Envoy of Death also gave some pointers regarding the innate divine art. As everyone knew, innate magical powers were divided into 9 levels. The lower 3 heavens, middle 3 heavens, and upper 3 heavens were completely different levels. An innate magical ability that was only comprehended up to the lower 3 heavens was not as powerful as a great desolate level martial skill that had been comprehended to the lower 3 heavens. However, if one could step into the middle 3 heavens and reach the 4th heavens, then the innate magical ability's power would be comparable to that of a great desolate level martial skill. If he could comprehend the 7th heavenly layer and step into the ranks of the strongest in the upper 3 heavens, such an innate magical ability would definitely surpass ordinary great desolate level martial skills. This was especially so for the 9th heaven's innate magic ability. It was comprehended to the extreme, able to communicate with the most original power of the divine characters in the world. Even ancient martial skills might not be able to resist it. This was the difference between innate skills and martial techniques of various levels. No matter what, innate thaumaturgy is the strongest technique for most cultivators, since there aren't many grand desolate level martial skills in the entire Shenwu world. However, for Long Yu, innate thaumaturgy can only be used as a support. Just like the first innate magical ability he comprehended, Hand of 9 Underworlds, its main function is to infuse the power of the 9 Underworlds' godly script into the opponent's body, greatly weakening the opponent's power. If one moment of carelessness, they'll be completely corroded. For example, the 4 thaumaturgy realm cultivators, Qi Jiwu, had his power reduced by 80% by the Hand of 9 Underworlds, extremely terrifying. In the end, Long Yu's attacks still rely on the Nether Dragon Blade, as well as the 9 Underworlds Heavenly Light that he just learned not too long ago. 9 Underworlds Heavenly Light Destroy. With a shout, Long Yu's 9 Underworlds godly script spread out from his body, condensing into a jet black light in front of him. This light contained an endless power of destruction, and when it came into contact with a layer of soil above, it began to disintegrate, leaving nothing behind. Long Yu only gave it a try and used the 9 Nether Heavenly Light martial skill to obliterate the several dozen zhang thick layer of soil. At this rate, he only needed to use the 9 Nether Heavenly Light 100 more times to penetrate the several thousand zhang thick layer of soil, bringing Shu Chan, Hui Yuan Bai, and the others down from the Azura abyss. The process of breaking through the layer of soil was also the process of Long Yu practicing the 9 Underworlds Heavenly Light. As the 9 Underworlds Heavenly Light was destroyed again and again, Long Yu's understanding of this ancient martial skill became deeper and deeper, and he became more proficient in using it, causing its power to increase. The Death Envoy did not come over to help. He had said earlier that if he wanted to save Shu Chan, Hui Yuan Bai, and the rest, everything would depend on Long Yu himself. The Death Envoy would only help Long Yu disperse the violent Azura formation energy at the exit of the Azura abyss. The 9 underworlds' heavenly light condensed the most original power of the 9 underworlds' godly script, forming an extremely destructive light. Its destructive power was at least 100 times stronger than the pure power of the 9 underworlds' godly script. For weaker martial cultivators, the 9 underworld heavenly light could directly annihilate them, and not even their dregs would be left. Even for stronger martial cultivators, the 9 underworld heavenly light could quickly corrode their physical bodies. Even if they cannot be killed, it could still weaken their combat power. And most importantly, Long Yu could freely travel through the 9 underworlds heavenly light. This was why the 9 underworlds heavenly light was stronger than the ancient desolate shadow kill. The ancient desolate shadow kill was a grand desolate martial skill that required the user to condense an afterimage in order to switch between the afterimage and the main body. But when the 9 underworlds heavenly light was used, Long Yu could completely disappear into the 9 underworlds heavenly light and travel through it at will. Not only was it extremely agile, it was also very difficult for the opponent to see through him. The 9 underworlds heavenly light could be said to be an extremely powerful martial skill that combined both attack and defense into one. It was worthy of being a top-quality ancient martial skill. In the current Shenwu world, it could be considered one of the most powerful martial skills. Long Yu continued to use the 9 underworlds heavenly light. The several thousand zhang thick layer of earth was continuously destroyed by him, creating a path that extended towards Death Valley. Long Yu was able to use the 9 underworld heavenly light, allowing the 9 underworld heavenly light to seep into the soil, allowing him to travel through it and quickly reach the surface. However, this way, without a path for Shu Chan and the others, he would not be able to bring everyone away. And right now, Long Yu was continuously using the 9 underworlds heavenly light, which was very beneficial for him to comprehend this martial skill. The more troublesome part was that this martial skill consumed too much energy, and the exhaustion in his meridians was becoming more and more intense. Every time he used it, he would need to wait for a longer time. Fortunately, Long Yu still had a lot of pills that he had obtained from the cultivators of the High Clouds Empire. After he took these pills, he quickly cast the 9 underworld heavenly light in succession, and completely broke open the several thousand feet thick layer of soil. A loud explosion alerted Huiyuan Bai, Shu Chan, and over 100 people who were trapped outside Death Valley. These people who had been waiting outside for over a month all looked towards the dark cave and were pleasantly surprised to find Long Yu's figure. Long Yu, Shu Chan was the first to stand up in surprise, and without thinking, she ran towards Long Yu. Long Yu didn't expect this little princess to be so excited, and before he could react, he was pushed to the ground by her. Long Yu couldn't be blamed for being unprepared. Even if he was prepared, there was no way he could prevent himself from being pushed to the ground by Shu Chan. He had just used the 9 underworlds heavenly light in succession, and all the profound chi and divine characters in his body were almost exhausted. And Shu Chan also didn't expect Long Yu to be so weak that he was knocked down. She hurriedly stretched out her small hand and pulled Long Yu up. "How are you? Are you hurt?" Shu Chan asked with concern. "I'm fine." Long Yu shook his head. "That's good." Shu Chan heaved a sigh of relief, and then looked towards the underground cave that Long Yu had come out from. She asked curiously, "Where have you been for the past month? What's down there?" "We wanted to break open this cave and go down, but we sense that it's all mud down there. There's indeed a completely different world down there. Also, I found a path that allows us to leave." Long Yu raised his head and nodded at Huiyuan Bai, who wasn't too far away. "A path that allows us to leave." Long Yu's words immediately caused the hundreds of people around him to become excited. They had been trapped in this place for far too long, and almost none of them had thought that they would be able to leave this place alive. Now that they heard Long Yu say that they could leave this place, how could they not be excited? "Long Yu, what exactly is down there?" Shu Chan's curiosity was piqued. In truth, it wasn't just Shu Chan. Everyone else was also extremely curious about this, but they were too embarrassed to ask. "There is a divine death rune array formation below. I broke it and obtained 108 divine death runes. I also found a path that leads to the Azura Abyss. Long Yu solemnly said, in the depths of the Azura Abyss, I obtained more than 70 Azura divine runes, and then the violent array formation storm gradually dissipated. That's why I came back to find you all. This place can actually lead to the Azura Abyss. Hui Yuanbai's face lit up with joy. Like this, the remaining people could leave the Azura Abyss, and they wouldn't be staked by the Tianqing dynasty and Ghost Evil County's martial cultivators. Nearly 200 divine character inscriptions. Shu Chan's focus was different from Hui Yuanbai's. Nearly 200 divine runes. Everyone knew what that meant. For Long Yu to be able to say this openly, it undoubtedly showed his trust in everyone present. There is no need to mention Shu Chan and Hui Yuanbai. As for the other Nightmare Core martial cultivators, if any of them had any thoughts of betrayal, they would have already left this place and surrendered to the Tianqing dynasty. Why would they be trapped in this death valley and wait for death with Hui Yuanbai? Chapter 613. Under Long Yu's lead, the group quickly reached the underground space where the true Death Valley was. They all saw the passageway leading to the Azura Abyss. Beyond here is the Azura Abyss. The violent power of the Azura divine rune matrix should have dissipated by now. Long Yu pondered for a moment and said, but after leaving the Azura Abyss, how do we move? If we want to conceal ourselves, I can't support so many people concealing themselves. Let's go out first. The situation outside is not good. It's not good for us to move together. It's easy to be discovered. Long Yu, I heard that you and the princess have established a base for a comeback in the North Snow dynasty. Since that's the case, I'll let everyone in the army disperse and head to the North Snow dynasty. We'll wait for you and the princess there. That's not a bad idea, but can you guarantee your own safety? Long Yu glanced at everyone and said with a serious expression, the entire Tianqing dynasty is filled with danger. Everyone must change into a new set of clothes. It can confuse people. Yes, we just need to head south, and we'll quickly leave the Tianqing dynasty and reach the Flawless Empire, Hui Yuanbai said. We've already thought of the route. Although this will take a long detour around the outskirts of the Tianqing dynasty, which is 3 times the distance to the North Snow dynasty, it's the safest. No matter how strong the Tianqing dynasty is, it's impossible for them to find people in the Flawless Empire's territory. Yes, that's not bad. Long Yu breathed a sigh of relief and nodded. Hui Yuanbai was the general of the Nightmare Legion in the Shura Prefecture. His reputation was not undeserved. Since he could leave the Azura Abyss and avoid detection, he definitely would not stay in the Tianqing dynasty and wait to be surrounded. They would first head to the Flawless Empire and leave the Tianqing dynasty as quickly as possible. Even if they took a detour, it would be much safer than going directly to the North Snow dynasty. Then it's settled. The young commandery princess Shu Chan nodded at the side and said, General Hua, you should head to the North Snow imperial city of the North Snow dynasty first. Whether you go to the Azura residence in the city or the Heavenly Mandate Manor outside the city, it's fine. We're not strangers anyway. Just wait for us to come back. Everyone, as long as you can make it to the North Snow imperial city alive, you will definitely have a share of these divine characters engraved on my body. Good luck. Long Yu encouraged them one last time. Although none of the generals present had a lower martial arts realm than Long Yu, they listened to Long Yu's words very seriously. Divine inscription. They certainly knew just how precious a divine runic symbol was. Even though they were the commanders of the divine runic Nightmare Legion, there were only a handful of them that possessed a divine runic symbol. Out of the hundreds of people present, only a dozen or so had one. The others naturally yearned for the divine runic symbol. Now, as long as they made it to the North Snow Imperial City safely, Long Yu would prepare the divine runic symbol for them. This was undoubtedly an excellent opportunity. Although they understood that in this way, they would have to swear loyalty to Long Yu from now on. seeing that Long Yu and the young commandery princess were on such good terms. Wouldn't swearing loyalty to Long Yu mean swearing loyalty to the young commandery princess? For them, there was no difference. Don't worry, young Master Long. We will definitely complete the task and reach the North Snow Imperial City safely. Everyone shouted in unison, and their momentum was magnificent. Long Yu, the people I have left are all former commanders of the Nightmare Legion. Each of them has at least 3 divine realms of cultivation. If we take a detour from the Wuk Empire, there will be no problem for us to reach the North Snow Imperial City safely. You can rest assured. Hui Yuanbai smiled rather relaxedly. This was not him being blindly confident, but he had full confidence in his people. He had watched these people grow up, and because they were commanders of the Nightmare Legion, there was no need to doubt their mentality and character. Just from the fact that they swore to follow Hui Yuanbai to the death, one could see that they were firm and determined. Moreover, if they just hurried along, no one would cause trouble along the way and cause unnecessary trouble. Keeping a low profile was their rule when they hurried along, so it was indeed not a problem for them to head to the North Snow Imperial City. Then I look forward to seeing you all in the North Snow Imperial City, Long Yu said with a smile. Then, Long Yu, where are you and the young commandery princess heading to next? Hui Yuanbai asked. We are going to Azura Valley. When Long Yu heard this, he solemnly replied, the Azura Valley still has the Azura Holy Tree. If we can obtain the Azura Holy Tree, we will be able to obtain even greater strength. This will also be a great asset to resist Emperor Tianqin in the future. The Azura Sacred Tree. Of course, Long Yu would not forget this terrifying existence that had almost killed him back then. This was a giant plant transplanted from the Azura Abyss, and it possessed extremely terrifying combat power. Even an Emperor Path Secret Realm expert would not be able to escape from it. If they were entangled by the Azura Sacred Tree, Azura King and Ghost Archdevil King would only end up dead. This was the most terrifying aspect of the Azura Sacred Tree. In the past, Azura Prefecture had relied on the Azura Sacred Tree to defend against many invading enemies, and had even devoured the physical bodies of King Realm experts. He quickly returned and informed the group that there was no one outside. The group relaxed and left the Azura Abyss in a single file. Once again, they found themselves in the Nightmare Mountain Range, where the eerie, ghostly aura floated. There's no time to lose. Long Yu, princess, will take our leave now. Hui Yuanbai knew that this place was very dangerous and immediately decided to set off. Everyone be careful. Long Yu nodded. Then, Hui Yuanbai and the hundreds of Nightmare Legion generals split up and quickly left towards the south. They quickly disappeared into the eerie, ghostly aura and disappeared without a trace. These people were the elites of the elites. Even if they encountered some danger, they could mostly deal with it on their own. There was no need for them to leave together. It was easier to attract danger with more people. Let's go to the Azura Valley. Seeing that Hui Yuanbai and the others had left, Long Yu turned his head and said to Shu Chan, I didn't say that I actually obtained some opportunities in the Azura Abyss. I should be able to completely control the Azura Sacred Tree now. That's great. Shu Chan's eyes lit up when she heard this, and her face lit up with joy. She originally did not have much confidence in controlling the Azura Sacred Tree, but after hearing Long Yu's words, she immediately felt relieved. She did not ask Long Yu what opportunities he had obtained in the Azura Abyss. She only trusted Long Yu intuitively and would not ask openly. After all, everyone had their own opportunities. This was everyone's own secret. Even Shu Chan had many things that she did not tell Long Yu. The two moved together and headed north. It would take at least 3 to 4 days to reach the Azura Valley. During this period of time, the two would be in a constant state of danger. Once they were discovered by the cultivators of the Tianqin dynasty, or the Guaxia County, they would face endless pursuit. The two rode the Azura Spirit Boat and quickly left the Nightmare Mountain Range. just as they flew out of the Nightmare Mountain range, a large group of Jianghu martial practitioners suddenly appeared in the sky ahead. There were more than 10 of them, and they directly blocked their way in midair. It's the Jianghu martial practitioners. Seeing this, Shu Chan's pretty face darkened. They should have coincidentally encountered us. What should we do? Long Yu narrowed his eyes and saw that among the group of 10 people, there was one that he had seen before. Her name should be Feng Di. He remembered that when Long Yu had first come to the Nightmare Mountain range, he had wanted to go to the Ghost Evil Prefecture to gain merit. At that time, it was this long sword martial practitioner with butterfly wings who had led the team to stop him. He did not expect to see this guy again now. But this time, among the 10 martial practitioners in front, this Feng Di was the one with the lowest martial realm. Chapter 614. As soon as the 10 of them discovered Long Yu and Shu Chan, they split up and formed a circle around them, clearly not giving Long Yu and Shu Chan a chance to escape. Let's end this quickly and break out of the encirclement. Long Yu muttered to Shu Chan, "That's what I was thinking." Shu Chan nodded and focused her gaze on the strongest of the group, the Six Paths Divinity Realm Warrior. So, it's this guy, one of the 8 generals of the Shura County Mercenary Alliance. Now that the Tianqin dynasty has taken over Shura County, I wonder if the Mercenary Alliance still exists, but this person's strength isn't bad. There were countless organizations in Shura County, and the Mercenary Alliance was one of them. It was an organization of a large group of martial cultivators in the Jianghu. They accepted commissions from others and received rewards in return. Long Yu glanced at the 6 Daos Transcendent Realm Martial Cultivator. I discovered that the other party was already an old man with a head full of white hair. However, his hair reached his waist, and he still exuded a valiant aura. His eyes were filled with surprise. Clearly, the other party had not expected to see Long Yu and Shu Chan here. These two were wanted criminals with the most generous rewards that the Tianqin dynasty had issued. Everyone knew that the 6th prince of the Tianqin dynasty had been killed in the sacred grounds of Shura County, and the culprits were the young geniuses of Shura County. Shu Chan and Long Yu were obviously the main culprits. "Boss White Snake, leave that kid to us 3 brothers. You and the other brothers deal with the princess first." One of the 3 divine ability realm martial cultivators made a suggestion to the white-haired old man. White Snake nodded. "All right. That kid is just a divinity realm martial cultivator. Although he defeated Qi Zhiwu, who was in the 4 Paths divinity realm, it shouldn't be a problem for you 3 brothers." The news of Long Yu killing Qi Zhiwu had already spread throughout the entire Azura County. This White Snake Mercenary Alliance battle general was very clear about this. However, 2 of the 3 brothers were at 3 divine tier, and 1 was at 4 divine tier. Their combined strength was not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. It was more than enough to deal with Long Yu. "Feng Di, you're in charge of guarding. If they want to escape, take the initiative to intercept them. The rest of you, follow me to deal with the princess." As soon as the White Snake gave the order, the division of labor came out. 3 of them would deal with Long Yu, 6 of them would deal with Shu Chan, and 1 of them would be on guard. This distribution was quite reasonable. At least in their opinion. There was no way they would lose in any aspect. He who strikes first has the advantage. Long Yu carefully observed the scene. When he saw 3 martial cultivators looking at him, he immediately knew that they wanted to deal with him. Without any hesitation, he nodded at Shu Chan and disappeared from midair. Divinity concealment. Long Yu had perfected this method. It was impossible for the 10 people in front of him to find any trace of him. If Long Yu didn't want to fight this group of people blocking his way, he could just leave with Shu Chan divinity concealment. However, he didn't want the news of him and Shu Chan appearing here to spread. If that happened, it would be difficult for him to move in Azura County. Experts would definitely come to stop him soon. Therefore, the simplest way was to kill all of them. Light detection. When one of the 3 brothers saw Long Yu concealing himself, he immediately gathered the power of the light divine runes. A wave of power like sunlight shone on the battlefield, trying to find Long Yu. It was also at this time that Shu Chan agreed to Long Yu's plan to strike first and gain the upper hand. She immediately condensed her Azura's absolute light, and a tyrannical pitch-black beam of light shot out, accompanied by the eye of the Azura that appeared out of thin air. In an instant, one of the 5 transcendent realm powerhouses was killed. The reason why she did not choose to target the 6th Daos realm White Snake was because she knew her own abilities. If she wanted to deal with the White Snake, she would definitely not be able to easily kill it. Therefore, she might as well cut off its wings first and then fight it alone. At this moment, Long Yu's figure appeared directly behind one of the 3 brothers. The Nether Void Dragon Blade was already in his hand. In an instant, he absorbed the soul imprints of the 3 brothers and immediately used Soul Explosion. Soul Seal. Soul Explosion. Long Yu held the Nether Dragon Blade in his hand, and the power of the Soul Explosion instantly spread out and blasted him away. As for the martial cultivator who'd comprehended the light divine runes and tried to find Long Yu, he was instantly killed by the Soul Explosion, and not even his bones were left. The power of the 9th Hell divine runes spread out in the battlefield. Long Yu continued to use divine concealment, and then 4 primordial shadows appeared and attacked the remaining 2. One of them was in the 3 divinity realm, and the other was in the 4 divinity realm. They'd been full of confidence in killing Long Yu, but now their expressions changed drastically. Before the real battle had even begun, one of their own had already died, and they couldn't use the crucial formation. It had become extremely difficult to deal with Long Yu, who was able to kill Qi Zhiwu, an expert with a great desolate level warrior weapon. Blood Sacrificial Shadow Annihilation. The desolate ancient shadows each used their own techniques. The small black and red human figure rapidly dashed out, rushing towards the 2 martial cultivators with extreme speed. The 2 martial cultivators used all of their strength to defend, and only then did they manage to block Long Yu's attack. However, Long Yu's attack arrived once more before they could even heave a sigh of relief. Nether Dragon 9 Explosions, Dragon Heart Decree. This attack targeted the martial cultivator in the 3 divinity realm. In just an instant, the dragon roar that resounded from the surroundings completely controlled the martial cultivator's heartbeat. And then the martial cultivator's heart meridians exploded as Long Yu circulated the power of the 9th Hell divine runes. 2 martial cultivators in the 3 divinity realm were instantly killed by Long Yu. Now, Long Yu had to face the remaining martial cultivator in the 4 divinity realm. You killed my brothers. You're dead. The remaining martial cultivator's eyes were bloodshot. 2 of his brothers who had grown up with him had been killed by Long Yu, and this made him furious. His entire body glowed with a bright red light, as if it was the word battle. It's the battle attribute, divine runes. Long Yu's heart skipped a beat. This was the first time he had seen the power of this attribute. It was said that martial cultivators who comprehended this attribute would fight with no regard for their own lives. They were extremely crazy, and their destructive power was extremely strong. The battle attribute was one of the 8 major attributes of the divine runes, and the power of this attribute existed naturally for killing. Kill. At this moment, the 4 transcendent realm martial cultivators, whose bodies were flickering with red light, seemed to have gone crazy. The 2 huge axes in their hands began to spin rapidly as they attacked Long Yu Fei. What followed were 2 blood-red rays of light that drew a bright red cross in the air, causing people to tremble in fear at the sight of it. So fast, Long Yu's heart skipped a beat. From a moment the martial cultivator's body glowed with red light to the moment the twin axes arrived before him. Only a breath of time had passed. Flash of the Dragon's Sparrow. Long Yu subconsciously used this life-saving martial skill, but the martial cultivator who was glowing with red light simply sneered. Then, a burst of space divine rune power attempted to pierce through space and slash at Long Yu's body. This person had actually comprehended the battle attribute and the space attribute. Dual attribute divine runes. Long Yu was startled. There was no time to think, and he could only use the 9 Serenity's heavenly light as quickly as possible. Fortunately, he had practiced this move over 100 times not long ago. Otherwise, he really wouldn't have been able to use it so quickly. As the 9 Serenity's heavenly light appeared, Long Yu's surroundings turned pitch black. Then, his entire body melted into this pitch-black 9 Serenity's heavenly light. The 4 Transcendent Realm Martial Cultivator's twin axes split open a crack in the 9 Serenity's heavenly light, but they had already lost track of Long Yu. Instead, they were quickly enveloped by the 9 Serenity's heavenly light once more. The power of the 9 Serenity's heavenly light began to rapidly corrode the Martial Cultivator's body. Get out of my way. The blood-red figure wielding the twin axes fiercely struggled against the 9 Serenity's heavenly light. The battle attribute, Divine Rune Power, attempted to break through the 9 Serenity's heavenly light's blockade several times and escape. However, Long Yu always paid attention to the direction in which the Martial Cultivator charged, concentrating on reinforcing the 9 Serenity's heavenly light in that direction. As the 9 Serenity's heavenly light condensed around Long Yu's body and exploded outwards, the 4 Transcendent Realm Martial Cultivators seemed to suffer severe injuries. Their movements became slower and slower, and their minds became weaker and weaker. The power of the 9 Serenity's heavenly light could not only corrode a Martial Cultivator's physical body, but could also corrode the opponent's mind, causing them to gradually lose the ability to resist. After being trapped in the 9 Serenity's heavenly light for a few breaths, the 4 Transcendent Realm Martial Cultivators had already lost their will to fight. The blood-red battle attribute Divine Rune on their bodies grew weaker and weaker, until Long Yu quietly released the Siphon Divine Rune and completely absorbed them. Die! Seeing that the Martial Cultivator was on the verge of death, Long Yu withdrew all the 9 Serenity's heavenly light and returned it to his body. Then, wielding the Nether Void Dragon Blade, he easily shattered the 4 Transcendent Realm Martial Cultivator's heart veins. In less than the time it took for an incense stick to burn, Long Yu had killed all 3 brothers. This scene shocked the vigilant Feng Di, as well as the 6th Transcendent Realm Martial Cultivator, White Snake, who was fighting with Shuchan. Under the White Snake's pale white hair, a look of astonishment could be seen in his eyes. Obviously, he did not expect Long Yu, a mere Transcendent Realm Martial Cultivator, to have such a powerful combat strength. No wonder he was the one who killed Qi Jiwu. Meanwhile, the White Snake's battle with Shuchan was not going well either. One of them was killed by Shuchan, and the remaining 5 of them surrounded Shuchan. However, they could not break through the defense of her great Desolate Realm combat weapon, the Primordial Azura Compass. They could not hurt her at all. If this continued, as long as Shuchan continued to cast her innate divine ability, the others would definitely suffer. Try to run? Long Yu glanced at Feng Di, who was on high alert. When he saw Feng Di killing the 3 brothers, his eyes flashed, and he immediately knew what Feng Di was planning. Chapter 615. Just as Feng Di was about to run, Long Yu took action. His figure flashed and appeared beside Feng Di in the next moment. Although Feng Di's strength had improved and she had stepped into the Divine Ability Secret Realm, she was still the same as Long Yu, just a Divine Ability Secret Realm. To Long Yu, martial cultivators of the same realm were no match for him. Kill! The Nether Dragon Blade was in Long Yu's hand. With a casual wave, the power of the 9 Nether Divine characters condensed and easily cut off Feng Di's head. Feng Di was still flapping his butterfly wings in an attempt to escape, but he did not expect Long Yu to be so fast and kill him. His eyes were wide open and filled with shock. Continue. Long Yu turned around and looked at the remaining 5 people, including White Snake, who was at the Mystic Realm. Long Yu was not worried that White Snake would personally kill him, because if he made a move, Shuchan would definitely take the opportunity to deal with White Snake. The old martial cultivator was one of the generals of the Shura County Mercenary Alliance. When he saw Long Yu kill his 4 subordinates so fiercely, his eyes narrowed. He knew that he had misjudged today. In addition, the princess, Shu Chan, was indeed as tyrannical as the rumors said. Even his 6 divine abilities were unable to kill her quickly. Retreat. The reason why White Snake was able to survive until now was not because of his recklessness, but because of his brain. He keenly sensed that he could not kill Long Yu and Shu Chan today, so he decisively ordered a retreat. Although capturing Shu Chan and Long Yu would definitely give him more rewards in front of Emperor Tianqin, it was obvious that he could not get those rewards now. As long as he went back and reported Long Yu and Shu Chan's location, they would also be rewarded, just that the rewards would be lesser. White Snake was the first to turn and escape. His 4 surviving subordinates were stunned and immediately turned around, wanting to escape quickly. "I have Azura, open!" Without any hesitation, Shu Chan activated the 2nd stage of the Eye of Azura. In the air, the pitch-black Eye of Azura opened like a human's eye. The power of Azura's divine runes surged out and enveloped the entire area. The White Snake and the other martial cultivators who wanted to escape were all stunned by the Azura divine runes. Their escape was hindered and slowed down. It was obvious that the Azura divine runes that spread out from the Eye of Azura made them feel extremely uncomfortable. Innate techniques were divided into 9 heavens and 9 realms. However, there were only 3 realms that would truly transform, namely the upper, middle, and lower heavens. Shu Chan's Eye of Azura had been comprehended to the 5th layered heavenly layer, so she could naturally display the 2nd stage. When the Eye of Azura opened, the Azura divine runes that emerged would automatically corrode the surrounding people's dantian and meridians, hindering their movement and battle. Divine power, emergence of the serpent's spirit. The old man's White Snake was entangled by the Azura divine runes. He immediately shouted, and a white snake appeared from his body, bringing with it a whirlwind that spread out and gradually dispersed the Azura divine runes. As expected of a 6th Daos divine power expert, he was not an easy opponent to deal with. Dragon Roar darkens the heavenly snow, Yellow Springs realm. Just at this moment, Long Yu also used his technique. 2 domain martial skills surged out violently, surrounding White Snake and his 4 subordinates who were trying to escape, weakening them by at least 10%. Before they could even realize that Long Yu was a threat to them, a white bony arm suddenly appeared out of thin air and grabbed the waist of the old man White Snake. Divine power, hand of the 9 nether. Break. Long Yu's eyes were filled with killing intent. He activated the power of the 9 nether divine runes in the hand of the 9 nether, and while the White Snake was not paying attention to him, he easily eroded the meridians in his body. The power of the 9 nether divine runes came crashing down, and before the White Snake could react, he was already hit. His whole body was weakened by half. What kind of divine power is this? The old man's eyes flashed with surprise. He did not expect that a guy at the divine power realm could actually weaken him so much. At this time, Shu Chan seized the opportunity and swallowed a pill, displaying the Azura's absolute light once again. A jet black light beam of Azura divine runes shot out, piercing through the air towards the White Snake. Seeing this, the White Snake of course displayed his defensive divine power as fast as he could. Countless white snake shadows emerged from his body, forming a white snake barrier in an attempt to resist Shu Chan's Azura's absolute light. Absolute light explode. A sharp light flashed in Shu Chan's eyes. The jet black Azura light beam exploded the moment it hit the white snake's barrier, producing a terrifying destructive power that seemed to destroy the entire space. This was the 2nd transformation of the Azura's absolute light. Its destructive power was directly increased by several times, and this move had also successfully destroyed the White Snake's defense, causing him to be pushed back several feet. The White Snake spat out a mouthful of blood, but he did not hesitate to turn around, still trying to escape. Naturally, Long Yu and Shu Chan would not let him go so easily. Chase. Long Yu had no choice but to take the heaven-grade pill that he had obtained from the martial cultivators of the Cloud's empire to restore his vitality, and immediately displayed the 9 nether divine light. As the pitch-black light quickly spread out, Long Yu's figure disappeared into the 9 underworld heavenly light. The pitch-black light quickly spread out, and in the blink of an eye, it had once again enveloped the white snake and her 4 subordinates. An ancient top-grade martial skill, even at the beginner level, was extremely terrifying. Those who were enveloped by the 9 nether divine light not only lost their vision, but were also constantly eroded by the power of the 9 nether divine characters, and had to expend a lot of energy to resist. Of course, a powerhouse of the 6 Daos divine powers like the White Snake would not suffer much damage. The 9 nether divine light was only a little troublesome for him, but this little bit of trouble was enough. Shu Chan chased after him from behind. She raised her small hand, and the desolate azura compass flew out. Countless jet-black lights fiercely shot out and instantly descended on the White Snake's body, trying to trap him. At the same time, the endless power of the Azura divine characters began to constantly erode his body. The combination of Long Yu and Shu Chan was almost despairing. Although the two's martial arts realms were not too high, they had endless means to delay the White Snake, who was as strong as the 6 Daos divine powers, for such a long time. Trapped by the light of the desolate Azura compass, the White Snake could not escape at all. He could only resist and use all kinds of means. Countless white snake lights bloomed, trying to disperse the 9 nether divine lights. However, Long Yu hid in the 9 nether divine characters, constantly replenishing the power of the 9 nether divine characters. How could he let him disperse it so easily? In the process of dealing with the White Snake, his 4 subordinates gradually escaped the range of the 9 nether divine lights. Although they were eroded by the 9 nether divine characters and suffered minor injuries, their strength was not bad. They were at least 4 powerhouses of the 4 Daos divine powers, so they managed to escape in the end. At this time, Long Yu and Shu Chan were not in the mood to chase after the 4 people, because killing the White Snake was the most important thing for them. The White Snake was trying his best to deal with Shu Chan, and did not notice Long Yu's movements in the darkness. The nether dragon blade suddenly appeared behind the White Snake, stabbing towards its back. The White Snake felt something was wrong and quickly condensed the power of the divine characters behind him to block the attack. However, he didn't expect the sharpness of the nether dragon blade to not be able to be blocked by the power of the divine characters he condensed. This was a top-quality, archaic combat weapon, one of a kind in the entire Shenwu world. Puff! The nether dragon blade stabbed into the White Snake's back, almost piercing through its heart. Unfortunately, the White Snake's body was not weak. After all, it was a 6 Daos divine powers realm powerhouse. In the end, it was not killed by Long Yu's attack. But it didn't matter. Shu Chan's desolate Azura compass attack immediately arrived. A giant black wolf covered in Azura divine characters descended from the sky. Taking advantage of Long Yu's sneak attack, it bit off the White Snake's head. That pitch-black Azura wolf was condensed by Shu Chan using the desolate Azura compass, a battle weapon. She and the desolate Azura compass were in perfect harmony, and condensing the Azura wolf was one of them. Simply put, Long Yu and Shu Chan have been working together for so long, and Shu Chan hasn't even used all of her methods yet. Of the innate thaumaturgies, Shu Chan knew 4, but she had only used 2 of them. As for the desolate Azura compass, her soul fusion also had at least 4 abilities, but she had only used 2 of them. Even so, the White Snake had already been killed by Long Yu, and Shu Chan continued chasing. We can't let a single one of them escape. Long Yu nodded to Shu Chan, then burst forth with extreme speed. After swallowing a pill, he chased after the 2 4 Daos divine powers realm cultivators. Not long after, Long Yu and Shu Chan gathered at the top of a mountain. Done. The 2 looked at each other and smiled, then split up to chase after the remaining 4 martial cultivators. It wasn't a difficult task for them, but they did consume quite a lot of pills. After a simple calculation, the two of them had consumed at least 10 pills just to deal with the white snake and the other 10 martial cultivators. It was quite a huge consumption. Although they had obtained more than 100 heaven-grade pills from the martial cultivators from the Cloud's empire, it wasn't enough to sustain their consumption. The two of them discussed for a while and decided that it would be best for them to conceal their tracks. Even if they had to slow down, they would still be able to reach the Azura Valley sooner or later. If they were to fight a few more times like this, not only would their tracks be exposed, they would also consume a lot of pills. After all, if they wanted to fight one against many and defeat the strong, taking pills was their greatest capital. They could repeatedly use their martial skills and divine abilities, and they could also recover their strength at the fastest speed. If they didn't have these pills, they wouldn't have been able to catch up to the white snake and the others when they tried to escape. If they let any one of them go, it would be a huge threat to them. Spirit concealment. Long Yu brought Shu-chan with him and used the spirit concealment technique, heading towards the north once more. Under the spirit concealment state, they would need at least 5 to 6 days to reach the Azura Valley. However, Long Yu and Shu-chan weren't in a hurry. Spending 5 to 6 days on the road was nothing. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.